It seems to cause more suffering when we tell people to just stay in the closet and just not worry about it, right? That seems to cause more harm than having these accommodations would. And therefore, we would make those accommodations. That's how we argue in favor of trans rights. It seems to be, like, I don't even know how you would argue in favor of trans rights without making these assertions. This seems like super basic to the argument.
So, welcome back. Here's our debaters, right? I see that Sondsol is trying to play some Wasp, but it is beyond his ability because Wasp is just too sick and useless. Sondsol. So tonight's episode is on Xenogenders. We have Bunk to our upper right and Sondsol to our upper left. I'm going to let Sondsol introduce his channel first and kind of tell you guys where you can find him to go make fun of him and harass him like I always do. Go ahead, Son.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sondsol. I like to play video games online. People like to watch me fail at playing video games. That's kind of my whole shtick. I was actually trying to play your intro music. Why the fuck did they choose G sharp as the key? What the fuck is wrong with them?
They're based and it's awesome. So
yeah, G sharp based. Okay, yeah, got it.
You're saying that intro music's not awesome, Sondsol?
No, the intro music is fine.
Well, then it's G sharp, so shut the fuck up.
C.
Well, I see you think it's awesome, so go ahead. You gonna introduce?
I've already introduced myself. I'm Sondsol. I like to argue with people. That's all I do. Okay.
Yeah. Where's your channel, dumbass?
It's on everything. Sondsol on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter. If you want to harass me on Twitter, all right, I'm there.
All right. All right. Bunk, how you doing tonight? It's nice to see you. It's your first time debating on the Crucible.
Yeah, dude, my fucking heart's racing, man. This is all I've been looking up to. This is all I have going for me in life, okay? Hi, I guess I'm Bunk. I'm a Wizard 101 live streamer. I'm the best at Wizard 101. Some may even call me the Grand Wizard. I occasionally also debate politics with people on the internet. It's a little thing that I do on the side. I take a pro-xenogender position. I'm going to be arguing in favor of them and that they ought to be respected, that it's something worth advocating for, and that we should be in favor of it. Today I aim to present a strong argument for these positions in this discussion with Sondsol as my debate opponent. I hope at the end of the discussion we can like reach some kind of agreement, some kind of some better positions for both of our ends. I hope to bring both you and the audience more on my side.
Okay, but here's my one rule: if you do that stupid ass tonal thing that Destiny does, where they're like, and then da 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 da, because da 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 da, I'm gonna literally throw you off the Crucible.
Well,
yeah, I'm doing it already. I'm doing it already. Right? Can't do that because it just annoys me.
All right, you're silencing my freedom of speech by throwing me off the Crucible. Okay, this is my
and
right.
I just silenced it again, Bunk. But you're back. So don't do the tone thing. Don't do the tone thing. You're opening 5 to 7 minutes per debater. You don't have to take the whole thing. If you yield your time, it doesn't go back to the other debater. You have an hour and a half of cross-examination before we get to Q&A. Bunk, you were the challenger, so you get to open. Go ahead.
All right. As I said before, I'm taking a pro-xenogender stance. I think that xenogenders are something that we kind of have to take as something that is true and should be respected under most circumstances to a reasonable extent before they start causing more harm than they do good, which is under most circumstances, I would say. I think that this comes in tandem with advocating for trans rights specifically. I think that to be consistent and to properly hold our positions, rhetorically speaking, we have to have consistent positions, and therefore we must accept xenogenders as something that we would be in favor of. Yeah, that's my entire position, laid out in the shortest time possible, and I guess I'll give it over to Sondsol.
You're up, Sondsol.
Sure. So for me, I've been having a lot of these discussions recently. I got in trouble with a lot of people on Twitter over it. I've done a lot of research into this in terms of just like the arguments that people put forward about xenogenders. Hopefully I'll hear a new one today because all the other ones seem to boil down to, I just kind of like this thing, or I really like this aspect of my personality, and I'm going to call that my gender. I don't think that these identities that people are assuming are necessarily, you know, not worthy of respect, but they don't fall into the category of gender in any of the conversations that I've had. If it ends up that I am convinced in some way, shape, or form that these xenogenders, whether they're star gender or vampire gender or deer gender or anything like that, like I can conceive of myself changing my opinion on it, but it would have to. You would have to convince me that these things fall within the category of gender and not outside of it. Yeah, so that's, I guess, is what I got.
Okay, before we get into the cross-examination, let me remind everybody, like, share, subscribe, do all that, you know, shit you're supposed to do. And also, Sondsol, I have M&M cookies that my wife baked for me, and you fucking
You
can't have any.
child.
You can't have any,
fucking
you son of a bitch.
You
get
fucking
none.
rainbow. Listen, you talk so much shit on gay people, and yet here you are eating rainbow-colored fucking cookies.
You know, you don't get to hijack the rainbow, motherfucker.
I'm not hijacking shit.
Cross-examination's up. Go ahead.
All right, Bunk, can you define gender for me? Like, what is your definition that you use?
There are multiple different parts of gender. The two I'm going to be distinguishing on, and the most relevant parts of it today will be gender identity and gender expression. Gender identity being some kind of internal feeling which we have, that what we identify with, right? The ways that we identify with masculine, feminine, or the rejection of very binary categories, which is where you get people who identify as a man, a woman, or non-binary. And then for expression, it'd be like the way that people perceive your gender, right? So if somebody presents in a very feminine way, we would call it they have a feminine gender expression. Or if they present in a way that is not typical for their gender identity or their given sex, we would call that an atypical gender expression. These are the ways that I define gender.
Okay, so I agree that those two parts do make up gender, but do you recognize that in order for gender to be something that is recognized, especially the second part of it. Okay, how about this? The way that I define gender comes in three parts. The two parts that you described, but also the social aspects, the social construct of what gender is. So the way that I usually describe this is we have three bubbles kind of gender, right? We have the societal aspect. So this is how we recognize other genders, how we, and by recognizing someone's gender, we can, we know basically how they wish to be interacted with, what pronouns we should use, you know, whether we're more crass or whether we're less crass, you know, more aggressive, less aggressive. So like that's kind of like the societal aspect. Looking at people, looking at characteristics that they have, and recognizing what gender they are. The second bubble inside of that one is the gender expression, like you said, a set of characteristics based off of aesthetic choices, secondary sex characteristics, mannerisms, etc. That, you know, when we reach a sufficient level or a sufficient number of these characteristics, we can generally tell this person is a man, this person is a woman, this person is non-binary. I think that people are starting to recognize non-binary people in that way now. And then the final one, the most like individualized part of it is the internal like experience of what gender is. Do you feel more masculine, more feminine, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. So what I would say is those first two categories are essentially one and the same. The expression that you have is going to affect the way that you recognize gender. And while that might change throughout time, for example, you could be expressing the same set of traits, they might be perceived differently. Those would both be encapsulated by your expression of gender. It seems to be an adequate way of categorizing that.
Sure. The reason that I would separate out the outer two most layers is because while the expressions can stay the same, how society interacts with those different expressions can be different, right, over time.
Sure.
So that's why I would separate those things out.
Stop starting every fucking sentence with sure. Stop it. Fucking stop it.
I don't believe I've started every single sentence with sure, but if it's going to drive you insane, I'm going to do it more intentionally now.
We're agreeing with each other, BPF. Let us get to the part of the contention.
I'm like a little child. If you tell me not to do it, I will do it more. Okay, I'm never going to grow out of that.
Sure.
See, you just did it there. That was very clever.
Well,
that was funny. Yeah, it was very funny.
Anyway, go ahead, Bunk. You're up.
Yeah, so I think we're in full agreement on that. I think that the ways people react to gender can be different, but I think that that's both encapsulated by expression, unless you're talking about the actual like physical traits that you express. But I don't know how much that has to do specifically with gender, because it seems that the way that people are going to interpret the ways that you express and the way that that relates to gender are pretty much one and the same, right? So if what it means to be a woman changes throughout time and someone wants to express in the way of a woman, that will be in tandem with the way that people are going to react to the way that they're expressing.
Right, but the social understanding of what a woman is will change, right? So
yeah, that's what I just said.
Himself, right, but like that's why I would say that the social aspect needs to be separated out of that, right?
Not necessarily. I think right now we're kind of going over the same thing, maybe saying it in a different way. I can try to say it one more time.
Sure.
So the ways that people understand to be a woman and the way that people are going to try and express a woman are going to follow with each other, right? So the way that I use, for example,
Sure.
the
Okay,
word
I
woman
understand.
is going to
Yes.
follow with what society understands as the word woman, right? So I want to
Sure, I
communicate.
understand what you're saying now. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, okay, so now that we both know what our understanding of gender is, can you explain to me why something that other people wouldn't understand to be a gender can be considered a gender identity?
Well, people can understand for it to be a gender, but they don't even have to understand for it to be a gender, for it to be a gender identity. We've already made that distinction. Previously, you even made that distinction for me. So, for example, if no one understands your gender identity, you can still feel that. That can still be a valid feeling within yourself, and it can be still something that you would like to express to people. For example, it seems that certain people identify with xenogenders. It's an effective way to communicate to maybe people who have similar gender identities, what you feel internally, right? For example, I could make a xenogender right now, right? Let's say that somebody identifies as bitch gender, because we tend to see dogs as more masculine, and, like, for example, cats as more feminine. There's no real reason we do this. It's just kind of a thing that we do. But being a bitch, it means to be both a dog, something we associate as masculine, but a feminine version of that, right? So that could be a way of communicating that through something that most people wouldn't recognize on the surface to be a gender, right? It kind of opens a dialogue, and it's also a way of trying to communicate that in an effective way to other human beings.
Can you explain to me what you mean by bitch gender?
Yeah.
In a way that explains how it is a gender and not someone trying to explain a personality trait, because you already added in there feminine, so that would point towards like something that would be considered more gendered, right? But now we're adding.
I also threw a masculine there, so I used both those words.
Well,
so would you agree with me?
For bitch gender, right?
Okay, so maybe I'll start over again. Okay, I'm gonna run through the line of questioning. So, would you agree with me that generally speaking, people tend to see dogs as more masculine? And cats
I understand that part,
right?
Right. That's why I'm specifically asking. Bitch
so let's say a bitch is a female dog, right?
Yes.
Right. So maybe someone wants to communicate that while they identify with both masculine and more feminine characteristics, they might say, "I am bitch gender," right? Something that is typically associated to be masculine, but a more feminine version of that, right? That would be an effective way of communicating that, I think. That'd be probably the most effective way I can think of communicating that.
Okay. So what I'm trying to ask you is, I understand that they're trying to present or trying to convey a feeling of being a more feminine dog, right? Rather than just being like puppy dog gender, they are female dog gendered, right? Feminine dog gendered. Right? Where does the dog play into the gender there?
Well, the dog is just the way that we see dogs societally is a more masculine thing in comparison, like a cat, for example, right? And then they're using that as a metaphor to try and express the ways that they interact with our societal categories of masculine and feminine. They're not literally claiming they are a dog.
No, I understand that, but that's why what I'm trying to get out of you here is, I understand that it's a metaphor, but what is the dogness that they're trying to like?
The dogness is merely the way that we understand dogs to be more masculine. I don't know
how does that present in as a person is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, men and women, we have societal understandings of what a man and what a woman is, masculine, feminine, right? So
you're saying
if we understand that people categorize, for example, dogs in a similar way, it's like something that's masculine, but can be female or can be feminine at the same time, right? We can use that. We could say, I'm bitch gender, to communicate that understanding of what somebody feels inside, right?
Okay.
That seems to be an effective way of communicating. I don't know how many more times you'd like to ask the question.
So it's not communicating to me. You're communicating what a dog is. You're explaining to me what
I'm not saying what a dog is. If I want to communicate what a dog was, I would use very different words.
Sure, you're communicating to me how society looks at dogs.
Well, yeah,
right, and
that's pretty essential to understanding what I'm trying to say when I say bitch gender.
Right. So I understand that part, but how does a person present as bitch gender?
They would present as bitch gender in maybe some way that we view as both masculine and feminine, the same way that we view a bitch. The problem is you're asking me to communicate it with words that would be less effective. And the reason I'm communicating it by saying bitch gender, because that's the most effective way. Yes, so something that is both more masculine in certain categories, but also recognizes more feminine.
How is this any different than someone who is trying to be presenting themselves as like a butch lesbian or a feminine man, then something
a butch
that is more
lesbian or a
masculine,
feminine man. So
sure,
a
because you're
butch
saying really
lesbian
quick.
might be
Let me explain why. Let me explain why I'm asking you this question. Because,
okay,
or
you don't have
why
to get
I'm
close to
using
your
those-
microphone. Okay, we
Right.
can
Well,
have
you're
just a
talking
conversation.
Right. I know you're talking over me every single time I try to like explain stuff. So the reason
okay.
I say like a feminine man or a butch lesbian or like a masculine woman, right, is because we're taking something that is mostly masculine, but also presents somewhat feminine, somewhat femininely, right? So how does bitch gender different? Like, how is it different than those things?
Well, I wouldn't say particularly that that communicates the same thing, right? So whenever somebody's a butch lesbian, we just understand them to present more masculine.
Right. So how would a
Right,
bitch
yes.
gender person present differently if they're
Well,
just presenting
we're not
a more
fully
masculine...
assessing how they're presenting. We're more so understanding what they feel internally. That's what we want to talk about, because we're talking about identity right now. We're not even on the part of expression.
Okay, I thought that you were talking about that they would present more masculine, like / feminine.
No, we're trying to communicate a gender identity. So you identify with a xenogender, right? There's some kind of usefulness in communicating your identity and having that identity be recognized and respected. This seems to be something that people enjoy having, because whenever they express the idea, they would like you to respect that, right? And this seems to be reason to believe they have these feelings internally, right? Like, for example, if someone says, hey, I don't like that joke you're making, it makes me upset, right? That tends to be enough of an indication that they're probably upset by that, right? So if they're saying that I'm upset when you don't recognize my identity, that seems to be reason enough to believe that they have that identity and they're going to be upset if you don't recognize that.
Sure. I see. And what I'm trying to, and the position that I have is that these things are identities, but I don't think they fall under the category of gender. So for instance, if we take someone that is, that says that they are goth gender, right? Goth is in and of itself its own category, right? It's a subculture that in itself has its own aesthetic choices and musical kind of like it has a music culture, kind of like an attitude around it. It has an aesthetic around it, right? This is its own category, right? You can be a woman and a goth. You could be a man and a goth. You could be non-binary and a goth, right? But to be goth gender doesn't speak to the gender of the person. It speaks to like a subculture that they identify with, right?
Sure,
Which
but we're not
do
talking about a
identify with,
subculture
right?
that they identify with, correct? What I'm trying to communicate is what we originally defined as gender, right? The gender identity, the ways that we feel as it relates to masculine and feminine. That's what I'm communicating. That falls under our original definition of gender.
How does goth gender fall under the definition of like the internal
I'm talking
experience
about
of gender?
Bitch gender. I don't know about goth gender. You kind of made that up on the spot. Does anyone
Well, you
identify
said
with
that
goth
you also
gender?
made it. You also said that you made up bitch gender on the spot.
Right,
so
but
that's why
I
I'm just
don't
bringing
know
up another one.
particularly. I don't know particularly. Like, how does that relate to masculine and feminine the same way that bitch gender did?
It doesn't. But that's
It doesn't. Okay, so that doesn't seem to be. If we don't identify that,
but
okay,
xenogenders don't have to, because
if we don't
flora
identify
gender
that
is one that people like
a-
to identify as.
as a
Right?
way-
Vampire
hold
gender
up,
is one
I'm
that people
trying
like
to-
to identify as.
Can I? So if we don't identify that as gender under whatever definition you have, I don't know, like, what do you want me to do more with that? You're not giving me anything to work off of. If somebody asked me to call them by pronouns and said, hey, I identify as goth gender, I might poke and I prod at them a little bit more. But if those pronouns represent their gender identity, and they're saying this represents to me what is my gender, I have no way of knowing that, right? I can't crack open their head and see, does this really relate to gender, right? There's no way of me of knowing that, and therefore I ought respect them regardless. But I mean, if we're trying to poke and prod it, like, well, what could this possibly communicating? You'd have to show me somebody who was trying to communicate something with that, and then I could maybe understand that, right? So, like, for example, if I made up a new word on the spot right now, and I said, what does this word mean? Well, I'm not particularly sure what that word means. You have to find me someone who's trying to communicate something with that word, and then let me talk to them.
Right. But even if you ask that one person, then the rest of society doesn't know what that word means.
But there could be a
Right?
subset of society that understand what that word means, right? We make up new slang all the time, right? And people understand what this means, right? Even if it wasn't broadly understood before, it seems to communicate something, and we use it.
Sure. Yeah. So like the concept of private language is one that gets brought up a lot in xenogender conversations, right?
Well,
I think that it is conceivable to me that we expand gender outside of the binary choices that we generally have, man and woman, right? We
Mhm.
have kind of created a third gender in non-binary, right? I know that non-binary
Okay.
is supposed to be an umbrella term, right? But like the way that like society is kind of interacting with
So,
it right now is as a third gender, right?
so
I can
hold on.
conceive of
Can
us.
I real quick? So what do you mean by private language? Because now I'm kind of lost. So private language, to my understanding, is something that's only understood by one person, right? Not multiple individuals. As far as the
private
original meaning
language,
of private language,
my
right?
understanding,
So do you mean like the language or a word that's only understood by a certain group of people? Is that what you mean by private language?
a private language is a this is my understanding of private language is basically a language that is being used by one or like very few people that like most people don't understand. Now it could become its own language or a dialect, right? Like
Hmm.
we have African American vernacular English, et cetera, et cetera. Like this isn't itself its own language. There are words in there that we wouldn't associate with the meaning that they are given in that dialect, but you know, like it is you know, its own language. But if there's like vast like swaths of society, or even like the majority of society doesn't understand something, then this is meaningless to society at large. Yeah.
Well, no, not particular. I understand what you're saying, that the word on its own won't be very meaningful to society unless people talk about it. So, for example, one usefulness of a xenogender might be to open a dialogue about what your gender is, right? So identify with this. People ask, what does that mean, right? And that new vocabulary, that new word that you came up with could be an effective way of communicating that specifically and can open up a larger conversation in which someone can understand what that word means and can be adopted into that person's understanding, right? So the word private language, the original arguments around private language, it was a language that's only understood by one individual, right? Ludwig originally was the one who proposed this private language argument. That's not really what we're going to be basing off of here. I understand the way you're using private language, but that's the way the wider society would understand private language. So like even you using that word itself kind of communicates something to me now that you've explained what you mean by that word. We're doing this literally in this conversation right now. We're using the same mechanics of language.
I don't agree that society at large, or even like people in this space, don't use private language like that, right? But let me ask you this on the topic of private language, right? So let's say someone walks up to you and says that they are a Nazi, right?
Sure.
How would you interact with that person?
I would assume that they agree with what I understand to be a Nazi as a wider definition of something, right? But if we're talking about, for example, philosophy, we're having a debate, right? And someone brings up private language, I'm going to assume they're talking about what Ludwig proposed, right?
Sure. So let's say that
right. So that isn't the definition that
you
used in this conversation. But I asked you what you meant by that, and now I have a better understanding of what we're going to be meaning when we say private language in this discussion.
So let's expand this all the way. If we don't think that language has to have like common meanings across like vast swaths of society, like it's easy enough just to like explain the words that we're using, right?
Well, they have to have. Well, obviously, we want to use the words that describe what we're trying to say best, right? Would you agree with me on that? Like, if there's already a word for something, it's not really necessary to make up a new word to explain that. Would you agree with me on that? You probably use the word that's already there.
I would agree with that. I would call xenogenders some other form of identity outside of gender, since gender already has some kind of shared understanding of both expression, internal experience, and societal like understandings on how to interact with each other. So yeah, I would say that
has nothing to do with the question I just asked. The question I asked was, do you think that, generally speaking, we're not even on the topic of gender, we're just fleshing out what we think about language right now. So do you think, generally speaking, if there's a word that already exists for something and there's no reason to not use that word, we probably should use it if it's understood by most people? Like, just from a basic utilitarian perspective, I want to communicate things the best way possible so we can achieve the maximum amount of utility, right?
So you're asking me if there is a word that most people understand, but I don't, then I should use that word out of utilitarian.
No, what I'm asking is, if there's already a word for something, you understand it. Everyone else understands this word, or everyone around you understands this word even. And you can use that word to communicate something. There's no real use in making up a new word for that. You probably should express it in the best way possible.
Yes. And that's why I answered in the way that I did, because I think that's
you went
an adequate
on an entire monologue afterwards, but I'm not going to pressure you on that, okay? I just want the yes.
I don't think there was a monologue.
Right. Well, he went on the monologue.
What?
You're saying he went on the monologue?
No, I'm saying that he talked about gender afterwards when I asked him this question. Yes.
Slow. Well, okay.
Well, the topic is gender.
So
Well,
here's the
no,
thing.
but now we're on
Slow,
language.
wait.
We have to flesh out
Chill
our
out,
language
guys.
first.
Hang on.
Okay, I'm being very chill with you right now.
Yeah,
So
I know.
we have to flesh out our language first.
You need to
before
listen
we
to
have
the
the
moderator, or else you're going to get muted.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry.
These are your choices. So I need to back this up. Can you guys define for the chat what xenogender means?
Sure. Bunk, go ahead first.
Sure. The way that I would identify it is something that differs from our typical expressions of what, like saying I'm masculine, I'm feminine, male, female, not binary, right?
Okay.
Those things would qualify as a xenogender.
A xenogender is, under my understanding given by people who identify with xenogenders, is a xenogender is a gendered identity that falls outside of the gender binary and and does not have the language by which to explain it with our language. So they use different items or concepts or different words as metaphors to describe what that internal experience is.
Exactly.
Okay. Go ahead. We'll start with Sondsol.
Okay. So I don't understand how when you say we have a word that generally describes something, right?
I'm just asking you a basic question about like language probably should be used that best describes something, right?
Yes, I agreed with that. And I added on a little quip at the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that little quip was unnecessary. I'm sorry, that's all I was trying to say. Gotcha. So if we understand that we probably should use words that are understood by most majority of people, if there's something that we don't really have words to communicate that exist right now, and there's a way that you could communicate that to somebody, you might have to make a new word or a word that might be more useful in the long term to describe that thing, and then start using that word as far as it comes to, for example, your gender identity, which no one else can directly observe, only you.
So let's take, what if someone were to come up to you and they were to start saying, they said a word or they said that they were something. And then you said, well, what does that mean? And they explained it to you. You said, oh, well, that is actually easier explained by this and this. Would that be not valid? Or
no, that'd be probably something you could say to them. For example, like, I think that you could probably better communicate it with another word that already exists. That'd be a perfectly fine thing. But
so that's what my argument is.
Communicate. Okay. So what's your argument, for example?
Right. So my argument is when someone comes up to me and says that they are vampire gendered, right? I don't think that you can feel dysphoria for not being a vampire, because I don't think that a human being can possibly have the sensory perception of what it means to be a vampire. Right? There's a lot that goes into vampires. We actually know that vampires aren't like real creatures. I know it's a metaphor, but like there's no way for a person to experience vampireness, right? And so when someone explains to me like all the different aspects of vampire gender, which I've had the pleasure of reading through a thread of someone explaining vampire gender, they explain all these different things, and they essentially are explaining how they feel very feminine and womanly, but also like a goth. And so I would say, wow, that's actually easier explained to society at large as you are a woman or a trans femme person and into goth subculture, because everything that they said lined up 100% with that. Right?
So I would have to talk to this person specifically, or see this thread specifically, to understand what this person was exactly trying to mean.
I'd link it, but they blocked me.
That's unfortunate. But what I would say is that if, for example, it's understood in this subset of people that if I say I am vampire gender, or for example, I would like to go by pronouns that specifically would denote that you recognize that I have a certain gender identity, or it makes me feel bad when people describe me with pronouns that I do not desire, and they tend to correlate with this vampire gender, right? I don't see a reason why I shouldn't respect that under those circumstances, right? They're trying to communicate what they can about their gender in the best ways possible. Maybe that is to use the word vampire gender. Maybe it isn't in the specific context. Maybe there's already a xenogender that exists for that. Maybe they're not trying to communicate their gender at all. I'd have to talk to the person individually. It's really hard to see what somebody's exactly trying to communicate, because we always have to talk through the prism of language. So whenever somebody tells me, hey, this is the best way to communicate what I'm feeling, and what you're saying is not exactly what I mean, there might be an actual misunderstanding on your end, because they understand what they're trying to communicate more than you ever could.
Okay, so here's my problem. Every single time I bring up an example, you say, "Well, I'd have to talk to that specific person to understand
Well,
what they're
yeah.
talking
So
about," right?
if I make a new word for this conversation, I say like, what does hibbita jibbita mean? Okay. You have to talk to somebody who's trying to communicate that word to like have a discussion about that word, correct? That seems to be like a fair assessment.
Sure.
Right. So if you bring up a xenogender, I have no idea what it's trying to communicate because I've never talked to anybody. I've never like, there's no way for me to actually know what that's trying to communicate. You just like ask me, okay,
Okay, but we've already
is this the most effective
recognized.
way to communicate that?
Sure.
That seems like a bit
Can
of
I
an
ask
unfair
you this
question,
then?
right?
So if we recognize that gender has a social aspect that allows us to look at someone, and when we like kind of recognize a number of characteristics that they have, we can generally say like, okay, this person probably wants to be interacted with in this way, blah 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 blah. If we accept the xenogender, like if we accept xenogender as a concept and we say, okay, xenogenders are this, they can't explain what they're doing, so I'm going to have to it eventually essentially makes it to where every single person you would have to interact with and like get an understanding of their gender identity before you were able to interact with them, right?
Well, not necessarily. For example, if it communicates, a lot of people won't understand what I mean when I say I'm gender apathetic. A lot of people won't understand that, and I'll have to explain that further.
I don't understand that. Can you explain that?
Sure. So I don't feel any internal.
It's 2 words,
expression
Andrew.
of
Come on. Sorry.
So I don't feel any internal way about my identity. I don't really feel like I need to fit into like a masculine or feminine category. It doesn't really matter to me whether I'm seen as more masculine or feminine. I am completely apathetic to this feeling, right? So if I say that, a lot of people won't understand what I mean. They're gonna have to have a conversation with me about what I mean by those words. And then once they understand what I mean by those words, maybe they walk through with more of an understanding of it. But to other people who are gender apathetic, they won't know what I mean when I say that thing. Or people who are already experienced with that that specific phrase. So it seems there's some kind of use to me saying I'm gender apathetic, right? That seems to be a real thing.
Okay, but I think that when we talk about gender apathetic, I think that those 2 words convey a lot more meaning than vampire gender, right?
Well, they could convey more meaning to you at this point because you're probably more familiar with it. You probably talk to more people who are gender apathetic than vampire gender.
Well, yeah,
maybe it's just easier for you to wrap your mind around. For example,
because there are 2 words that we use in common parlance,
okay.
right? Like apathy means that I don't really care about this thing, or I don't really care, right? And gender means like, you know, society's understanding of gender, right? Like all the definition that we gave earlier. So we can piece those 2 things together, right? Whereas vampire, a fictional fantasy creature that gets killed by garlic and stakes to the heart, and gender are so wildly outside of anything that you could, this is like 2 different categories, right? Rather than a category and a feeling about that category, right?
Well, I'd probably agree with you to some extent on that assessment. It doesn't really change the core argument. So the core argument is, sure, there are certain words that people will not understand until they have a further discussion about those words. We're not born with an understanding of words, right? We kind of have to have conversations. We kind of have to see them applied and used to understand what these words mean, and to maybe even use them ourselves, right? So if we're trying to communicate something and it's something that cannot be communicated to this person's knowledge, understanding, or just they cannot get communicated very well with words that currently exist, and they try and use other words to communicate that or communicate that more efficiently, that seems to be something that is a real feeling that they have, right?
Can you restate the question and possibly
I didn't
like
ask a question. So
well, you
what
said
I
right
said
at the end.
Oh, sorry. Right.
You asked if
okay.
I agreed.
Sorry, no, that's just the way I ended the sentence. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I asked a question unintentionally. So what I'm trying to get across is that if somebody can try and communicate what they believe their internal identity, or they experience their internal identity as, if they believe they can communicate that more effectively, maybe to people who experience the same thing and will use similar words, because we have somewhat similar understandings around the concepts of words, right? So like the word vampire elicits certain certain concepts to you, I'm sure, right? You have some understanding of what that word means, and we use that to try and communicate an internal feeling that there's not really very adequate words to communicate as of right now, and we try to use that to communicate to other people, and they now understand that. That seems to be a way that we can express that feeling.
Okay, can you explain to me? So I kind of explained what vampire gender was a second ago. Let's take, for example, like let's say that you were going to fuck me, I lost my train of thought. I saw Andrew stand up and I thought, oh shit, he's not going to hear what I'm about to say. And now I've lost my train of thought.
Now we can say the N-word, okay? We can discuss the N-word gender now. Big funny.
Wait, how about that? Why not? Would you be okay with someone who said that they were N-word gender, right? And they asked you to call them the hard R?
I probably wouldn't say publicly. I feel like that would cause more distress to more people if I were just like, we were in a town square and like someone's pronouns were like the hard R, right? That seems like it would cause more distress than respecting that gender or not respecting that gender. So for the basic like utilitarian analysis, I would say that probably causes more harm than good, and I shouldn't do that.
What if they... So respecting someone's gender identity is conditional?
Yes, of course it is.
Okay.
Of course it is. Everything is conditional, right? So if something causes worse consequences, right, for us, if we do it, we probably don't do it, right? Under those conditions.
So if you're arguing for the like utility that you get out of this, what would someone who is trying to get more utility out of vampire gender, right? Let's assume that like the thing that I gave was a faithful interpretation of what vampire gender means, right? Why would they not get more? Why would they not get more utility out of being a very goth presenting woman?
A very goth presenting woman, because maybe the word goth means something for like as far as the ways they view masculine and feminine. Maybe they view goth as more like masculine or more feminine in different ways, right? And they're trying to use that as a way to express their internal identity, right? That could be the case. But I would like to pull back to the point that I just made. Would you agree that if something has bad consequences, we probably shouldn't do it? Like that seems pretty basic to me.
Not always, but most of the time.
So if something has like bad consequences, like overall net bad consequences, you think that we not always shouldn't do that? Like it's just
because I wouldn't say that. So like let's say that we have the example of someone who comes into a hospital, 5 people need an organ transplant, and then this one person comes in and he's a match for all of them. Killing that one person and then giving his organs to everybody else would lead to like a net positive for those 5 people, and those 5 people are more than one person. So we would say that, yeah, in this case right here, this is causing a net benefit to society, right? While also saying that this is probably a bad action, right?
So that's actually a net negative to society. That's what I would argue. I would argue that that would encourage people to not go into hospitals if they know that they could be killed at any moment because someone needs their organs more, and that will make your entire system dysfunctional. This sets certain things up for society. But for example, let's say that we were in a closed system and it would just like, we only have these 5 people. These 5 people only exist. There's no other society. Just avoid these 5 people, and there's one person in the hospital bed. And you can kill them and save the other 5 people. I think that would be a net good, and that we should do it in that scenario. So that, for example, would be a condition under which I would say that you might want to do that, might not want to do that. Generally speaking, you don't want to do that because it's a net negative. Would you agree with me that it's a net negative, and that's why you shouldn't do it?
No, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, no, so you agree actually that when things are net negatives, you shouldn't do
that. Generally speaking, yeah.
Well, not generally speaking. We just ran through your example as to like.
Well, sure, but like,
we
both agree that it's
negative, and you agreed with me that's
a net positive.
What's the non-general? Like, what's the more specific example? Because I'm really curious.
No, like what I'm trying to say is like we both agree that this would be a negative thing for us to do that in general, right?
Well, yeah, it'd be a negative thing, and that's why I don't want it, because these outcomes are worse.
Right.
It'd be a net negative. That's why I don't want it. Not because it's a net positive and I still don't want it, which is what you try to bring it up as an example to do.
So you think that calling someone so you think that saying the N-word causes a more
in a public setting, yes, in a public setting, totally. Okay, if I was a white guy, just go around and my friend identifies with the hard R, I start calling him the hard R in public, that would cause a huge distress. Okay, people would wonder if I'm crazy. First of all, I would take a huge society, like my social life would almost be ruined if I went around just saying the hard R to everybody, like around everybody. There could be people who feel distressed with that word. Of course, that would be a net negative.
Okay, so what about the pronoun its? Let's say you're in a room full of trans people. Would you respect the trans person whose pronouns were its?
Oh, do all the other people in the trans or in the room feel like uncomfortable with that? Have they stated that to me?
You didn't add that qualifier for the N-word.
Well, no, we generally understand that like it's more likely than not that people are going to be offended by the N-word, right? If
Do you think that trans people are more likely than not to be upset by someone being
called it? No, not particularly. But if you think that's
you don't think that most trans people think that calling a trans person it?
No, not if they request it. Not if they request it. No, I don't think most trans people agree with that.
I didn't say like that they said it out loud to you right then. You know this person and you walk into a room and you see them hanging out with their friends. You say, that, well, you can't really greet somebody, say, hey, it, but you refer to them as an it to everybody else, right? And they don't know that the pronouns are it's. Do you think that causes too much of a net
I think
harm?
You probably should clarify why you're saying that under the, like, in that room specifically. But even so, I don't think many people are like traumatized by the word it because we use it quite often.
Do you think that most black
in the same way that people be traumatized by the word the N-word? Yeah, I think it causes a lot of people distress when they hear the hard R. Yes. I think, so you think quite frequently people get caused distress
when trans people,
get called the hard R. Yes, I think that is super agreeable. You got me on that one.
I actually super disagree with you. I think that most trans people really dislike other trans people.
You just brought up the hard R. Would you agree with me, broadly speaking, that the hard R is something that a lot of people are going to get offended, distressed by? That's going to cause like social harm if people go out and they just start calling people the hard R.
Not necessarily, no.
You don't agree with that.
I think that in the same way that you referring to trans people as it is going to cause people like societal harm, especially like I think that both of these things would cause some amount of like societal disruption.
Equal societal disruption. No, I think that's an absurd statement on the face of it. Yes, because we're going to be weighing the suffering and the positive benefits of that thing. Of course, they would have to be equal, right? Because if the suffering is super minimal or like super unlikely, obviously I'm going to weigh it as less. Yes, they would have to be somewhat similar.
How much suffering does society have to endure for you to stop referring to someone as their preferred pronoun?
To an amount that would weigh more than the suffering that individual would be caused.
How could you possibly ever quantify that?
How could I possibly ever quantify that? Probably by people who both go by pronouns and also are offended by like the hard R, for example. This is like a super like now we're asking why. How do you know that? How do I know that for a fact? Is a little bit different from the question of if I know that, then what?
Why? What? I'm just. This is really interesting. This is so curious. So
it's really just.
So let's say
basic.
We
like,
recognize that people
that.
No, not really at all. Because
if things cause more.
There are people in the trans community who kill themselves at a much higher rate than anybody else in society, right? And so by you misgendering them in public, I could see that possibly sending them over the edge, and they go home and they kill themselves. Whereas if you call them the N-word, like they asked you to, well, a couple of people might like turn their head and then like be like, wow, what an asshole, and then walk away, which causes more societal suffering.
What causes more societal suffering? How often do you think it's going to be that somebody is just not called the N-word in public and they're going to kill themselves?
That's not at all what has to do with
this conversation. Because if it was like 100%, no, that actually has everything to do with this conversation. Because if they were 100% going to kill themselves, like I didn't call them the N-word, of course I would.
How could you possibly know that?
Of course I would do that.
How could you know that?
We would probably have to look at like statistics, for example, right? So how often do people call themselves
or
kill themselves whenever they're not called the N-word?
No, how many people kill themselves when you don't call them vampire?
Probably not that many.
Then why do I have to fucking call people vampire?
Because it causes them some distress, right? And you would obviously not want to cause somebody distress. If there was nobody else who was getting like super distressed by it. Yeah? Would you agree with that?
I don't think that the distress that comes from not being gendered as a vampire is a distress at being misgendered. I think the distress that comes out of being not called
those pronouns, if you don't use their desired pronouns and that causes them distress, that would be distress from being misgendered, correct?
Do you think that all misgendering is equal? How about that?
Do I think that all misgendering is equal? Obviously not.
Okay. Do you think that calling a person who is trans, who has been going through all the hormones, or like, how about this? How about a trans person who can't transition, right? Medically, right? They socially transition, you call them the wrong pronoun. Do you think that causes more harm than calling someone vampire gender or not calling them vampire gender?
Like they can't transition. Do I think that causes more harm or less harm? I do not have the statistics on xenogender related suicides. I would assume that it would probably cause less harm because there's less like social stigma around not being called a vampire gender, which would probably incur them less distress. But if there was still distress there, and I have no reason to not call them that, of course I would. Yes. I want to avoid as much suffering for people as possible.
I don't necessarily, hold on, really quick. I don't necessarily disagree that in an interpersonal conversation between two people, like, you know, if someone were to come up and tell me, like, I would like it, like, I go by Nya Nyan, right? Going off of the video I watched of yours earlier, the person that used those example, as an example, right? So, like, I might use that just to get through the conversation or to get through the social interaction. But do I think that we could possibly, wait, really quick. Do I think that in general, by not affirming xenogenders and telling people there are multiple different categorizations that people can fall into, and they're not mutually exclusive. Just like I used goth gender as an example earlier, right? Goth gender doesn't really speak to a gender. It speaks to a subculture that can be presented more masculinely or more femininely. I think that possibly someone who is identifying as goth gender that wants to present in a feminine way might get more utility out of being like gendered either feminine or non-binary and then just presenting as a goth. Because they're going to, number one, be misgendered less often. Number two, they're going to be they're going to be perceived in the way that they want to.
So,
right?
What pronouns does goth gender person use, and what way can they present in order so they will get misgendered less? Because you just said they could present in a way that would misgender them less. So I'm just curious, like, how do you get xenogenders out of their expression? Like, I'm curious as to your example.
Wait, I actually have no idea what you're asking me. What are you asking me?
So you said that they could present in a way,
splitting their the gothness out of the gender, like, just
do you think people's gender identity is a choice that they can just like split it out there? Okay, so
but
that's not an option.
Proponents of xenogender generally do.
So you think that it's like they're just like choosing to make their life like super difficult by like choosing to identify with something, or like choosing to feel something that people don't understand? Or like,
I've asked this specific question, and yes.
Yes. So how do you know that?
The answer that that's the answer that I've gotten.
My question would be, so you know for a fact that their internal feelings are like can be completely divorced. Or are they saying that they outwardly express that they identify like that, and that's the choice they're making? Because those are two different things. Saying that I have an identity, I have an internal feeling, and espouting that internal feeling, right? Those are different things.
Yeah,
right?
I could never know that they're xenogender if they didn't
I am
tell
non-binary,
right?
I am non-binary, okay?
Sure.
So saying I'm non-binary is a choice. I make that choice to say that I'm non-binary. Would you agree with me on that? Yeah,
I don't think that I don't think that you've chosen to be non-binary. No.
Well, but I've chosen to say that I'm non-binary. Yes. Because at one point I didn't say that I was non-binary, right? I wasn't like out in that way. So I'm making the choice
think that a person who isn't
to say that I am non-binary, but that internal feeling is not a choice.
Right. I agree. So you think that someone who is trans, who can't be out of the closet, right, or isn't out of the closet, isn't trans until they announce to the world that they're trans?
No, I think that identifying as trans is different than like, or would you say outwardly like saying that you are trans is different from being trans. I think somebody is trans when their identity does not align with the way that they were assigned at birth.
Okay, but you're saying that you're not non-binary until you tell someone that you're non-binary?
No, I've not said that at all throughout any of this conversation. Those words have never exited my mouth.
Right,
what I've said is that there's a difference between saying that I will go by these pronouns, right? So what pronouns I say that I will go by is a choice. That's a choice that I make. Now, I would argue that's kind of a necessitated choice that you express that in quite a lot of circumstances, right? But that is a choice. I make that choice, right?
If someone has a gun to your head,
those internal, right?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but I wouldn't call that.
That's the distinction I'm going to make.
I wouldn't call these things a meaningful choice in the same way.
Well, yeah, it's somewhat a forced choice in certain situations. In a lot of situations, I would say it's somewhat a forced choice. Yes, but it still is a choice.
Is it? Can you meaningfully call something a choice if like the option is like suffering on the other end? So let's say,
Yes.
like,
Yes, you can.
So it's either, so let's say someone has a gun to your head and says you have to fuck this pig live on camera in front of everyone, or I shoot
Yeah, I
you
can
in the
make the
head.
choice to get shot or the choice to fuck the pig live on camera. Those are both choices. Obviously, one's being coerced in that situation, so I not say it's a completely free choice. I don't even know if we have completely free choices. I mean, we can get into determinism if you want to, but
I don't
the
think that that's
presumption
necessary
that we have
here.
some kind of ability to choose things.
Calling something a choice, sure, yeah. I think that like having like a meaningful option to choose something is necessary here, right? So if you have the option to,
so I don't think anybody has the meaningful option to not really, like, most people do not have the meaningful option to not identify the way that they do publicly. That's a very hard thing to do. You can make that choice, but there's suffering on the end of that. There's suffering on both ends of this. You are merely making an assessment. So I think whenever people do that, they have made the assessment for themselves that would be beneficial for that to be out and information in the public's eye, and then therefore they have made that choice. Yes.
Okay, so this sounds to me like you're saying that trans people choose to be trans.
They choose to publicly espout their trans. This is super obvious. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, like, why don't we just tell people to stop being trans?
Because that would cause a lot of suffering, right? So people feel distress when they are not identified with their pronouns. That's why people express what pronouns they would like to be used, right? It causes them distress. We see high suicidality when these things happen, for example, right? We can even, from self-report, right? I talk to a lot of trans people.
Everything you're saying right now.
Yes.
I agree with everything that you're saying right now.
So they have made the choice.
The problem is
because of those conditions, they have made the choice to espout they are trans. And that is a good choice, I would say. That is almost a necessary choice.
The problem that we have here is that when we talk about like gender is a choice, or like someone's being openly being a gender, when I say gender is a choice, like we both agreed on everything up to that point. I don't want to add like 50 million qualifiers on what the choice is here. So like, I'm going to just say like gender is a choice. We both realize that the internal
feeling is not a choice.
Yes, we both agree on that. So just for like ease of conversation, I'm going to say gender is a choice. Okay. So when we say that gender is a choice, it gives people who are trying to take away like rights from people a lot of ammunition to say, well, like, why are we adding all these different accommodations for trans people in society when they can just choose not to be trans, right? Being trans is obviously a choice. We all recognize that because they don't have to.
But then there's a follow-up argument to be had. So yes, while we do recognize that it is a choice as to what you publicly espout, yes, that is a choice. There are reasons we would follow up with, right? For example, it seems to cause more suffering when we tell people to just stay in the closet and just not worry about it, right? That seems to cause more harm than having these accommodations would. And therefore, we would make those accommodations. That's how we argue in favor of trans rights. It seems to be, like, I don't even know how you would argue in favor of trans rights without making these assertions. This seems like super basic to the argument.
The arguments that I would make is that someone everybody has a gender identity, and some amount of suffering is going to cause somewhat like or someone having like a misalignment between their gender identity and the way that their body is going to cause suffering, right? And they have no choice but to do some form of transition or suffer, right? So I would say there is no choice.
True. Well, though you said they had no choice but to.
No meaningful choice.
Okay, so I think a meaningful choice is kind of a weasel word here. They do have a choice. It's just one choice is a lot better than the other.
Okay, I think that the better choice here would mean, or I disagree that saying that just because one option is better than the other means that it's a meaningful choice, right?
Well, no. If one option is significantly better than the other, would not be a meaningful choice, in my opinion. Like if we were to make that distinction, I'm assuming that's how you would use the word as well, right? So, for example, if one option is like, I could go out and I could kill myself right now, right? And the other option is to keep debating you, right? I have the choice to do this. I'm not being, there's no like I have the will, the ability to do this, right? But it's not like. It's not like a
but that would be
choice, right?
an uncoerced choice.
I think there's a level of coercion at every single, to some extent, at every single point. Like how would you define coercion at that point? Now we're gonna get into like semantics of the word coercion. I don't know if that's very fun. And we can have that conversation if you want to.
I mean, we can move on.
We can
It
go
just
all the
seems
way
like-
down like Coconut Island with coercion. Okay, we can
Yeah,
have the
yeah, yeah.
entire
I would
socialism
rather-
debate right now.
Listen, I'm not a big fan of coconuts, so we can
right,
move
all
on from
right,
that.
yeah.
I think that we're just going to disagree on like that point right there. I
Okay.
guess.
I
let
think
me
we
see
actually do
here.
agree on that point. I think that we just disagree on the ways that we're using the words meaningful choice. I think we
Well,
both
we're-
agree that there's like
So
one
just
choice
so
that's
just so
way
you
better.
guys understand, unless you have something new that you want to bring in, the argument has become very circular at this point from both sides. You're essentially going over the same point.
Let me
kinda
ask.
ad nauseam.
Sure. Let me
Sure.
see here.
I think okay. I mean, if Sondsol would like to bring up a new objection to my argument, I think that'd be cool. Yeah.
I think that for me, we can move it on to another like part of the argument.
Awesome.
There's one part of this that really bothers me, is that so we could either move on to like using metaphors to describe gender, which I would say that is pretty fucked up. To like, you would never walk up to a trans woman and say you're only metaphorically a woman, right? We could talk about possibly like the
Okay.
like equivocating like xenogenders as being trans.
So I would actually like to
choose.
go to the metaphor one. That one's a
Sure.
fun one. I love that one. So at no point in time are we literally any like concept. There's no metaphysically perfect woman, right? That we can just say that's a woman. And if you fit that, then you're a woman. We've got that right. That's 100% true. There are concepts we associate with the word woman, and then we use the word woman to communicate that, right? We can also communicate that just as validly with the word, like with a metaphor, right? So for example, I have like my phone right here. I could describe this phone in a number of ways, right? Just because I describe something with a metaphor does not mean that that's like not currently there. At no point are we like taking gender out and we're just like putting out to the world. We're trying to discuss gender through the prism of language. I don't think that necessarily using the word woman, right? Because the ways that we identify people as woman are pretty much the same as like a social category or like an identity, right? That just because certain people describe their gender using a metaphor, that therefore every single person is just like not a woman. That doesn't seem to really follow. There's a lot of like non sequiturs in that argument. I guess we could go down that line of reasoning.
I would say like I would agree. There's no like one definition of a woman, but I would say that there are like
So
like
would you say that the
there's
statement
no
would be
necessary
true,
wait,
that
really
no
quick.
one's like
I don't think
okay. Yeah.
I would say there's no
Sorry.
necessary component to being a woman, but I would say that once you like do like have a necessary or a sufficient number of characteristics, right? You, people recognize enough of like these characteristics associated with womanhood as someone being a woman. Right?
I would agree with that. I think that we have a homeostatic property cluster that we call a woman, which is like a set of weighed traits, and then once it meets the right amount of these traits and becomes useful to describe it as that, we describe it as like a woman.
Yeah, so no
right?
necessary,
So
but
I would
definitely
say
sufficient.
that no one
Yeah.
is like truly a woman as like the true meaning of the word woman, right?
Well, there is no
but we
true
have
woman,
words,
but there are
yes.
there are characteristics that we
Exactly.
associate with womanhood that when we have enough
And
of these
there are
characteristics.
characteristics, or there are characteristics that we associate with other words, for example, right? For example, vampire or bitch, right? And we could use these words and the concepts associated with them.
But there
to
are
try and
necessary
communicate our
components
internal
of
identity.
both of those, right?
Like if someone were to claim like physically, like in the physical sense, I am a female dog, right? We have ways of verifying that, like that claim. And I would say that it would be like that cluster that we would call a bitch. They don't fit that, right? But if we're talking about their internal identity, I don't think anyone's claiming directly.
But there's
to be,
no
like, the
number of
true
characteristics
version
that
of, like, a
someone could
bitch.
be exhibiting that would like ever have other people recognize, oh,
Their expression.
bitch.
You're right. There is like
Well, actually,
no gender expression that is perfect.
Brittany is in my DMs right now, Andrew. So maybe, but sorry.
It's fucked up.
Sorry,
Okay?
I interrupted you for a dumb
I
joke. Go ahead.
agree with the misogyny. I just think it's kind of fucked up to do publicly.
I'm all
But
about public misogyny, my dude.
that's awesome. We're gonna get along just fine. So while I do think that's true, there's no real way somebody can perfectly exhibit the characteristics of whatever we would call that. They do have an internal identity that they're trying to communicate in a similar way. And I don't think that necessarily would invalidate other trans people. That doesn't seem to follow.
But okay, this is actually a genuine question. We keep on talking about internal like internal conceptions, right? But I don't
Sure.
think, and maybe I'm like you in this. Maybe I don't actually have an internal conception of my gender. I've said that before, but I don't actually know if it's true because I can only have my own personal like experience of my own internal experience, right? So like
Sure.
when we say like I don't have a I'm experiencing I don't know where like I don't have like sections of me that feel like this is my being a man, and this is me enjoying like strategy games, and this is the part of me that likes painting Warhammer miniatures, right? Like all of my internal experience is all one meshed up thing. But I do think that there is a part of it that is trying to express like gender. I have an identity inside of me, right? But it's there's no like defined thing. How can you like explain to me someone having an internal conception of their gender where they have isolated gender and nothing else, no other part of their personality, no other part of their interests or likes? Because when I talk to people about xenogenders, we're talking about personality traits, and we're not talking about like outward expressions, unless they're talking about goth gender, in which case they're talking about a subculture that has its own kind of aesthetics. I don't know how anyone can isolate gender and explain gender in just this way outside of a social conception that we apply to it. Sure.
So I'm gonna take that like one.
Andrew, hold on. I'm so triggered. Andrew, you looked at me like I was fucking crazy there. Where in your body is the fucking gender? Okay, where is your gender in your body?
I mean, I'm sorry, Sondsol. I wasn't looking at you like you're crazy. I was just looking at you like, thank God he's finally using my argument. But go ahead.
So
how does it? We'll talk later.
Okay, what I would say is there's no real reason to distinguish that like super necessarily, right? If someone, whatever that is inside of them, whatever that is, their internal identity, right? If that affects the ways that they would like to be recognized as far as their gender, it would be probably good to recognize that because they would suffer less, right? And then therefore, it doesn't really matter. Like I can't really crack open your skull and see what's the exact point that like interests start, gender ends. Is there even an exact point? Do we just like kind of make up this like little lie that there's these subsection parts of our identity and that they're not actually all the same thing?
So
right?
your argument.
Don't cut me off, okay? I would like to finish what I'm saying.
No, I understand.
And then you can
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know how you understand. I haven't even finished. So, like, if you've understood already, you're like Jimmy Neutron, okay? You're fucking looking into me. You're having a brain blast right now.
Listen, I have a 2000 IQ, all right? I got it verified by a doctor.
Hear that, Mio? You've been topped.
145.
No.
Child's play.
So, I don't think there's any way for me to know that. I don't even know if that's, like, within our ability to understand. But I don't know if we necessarily need to understand it, is what I would say. If it affects the ways that people would like to be identified, as far as whatever the outside understanding we have of gender is, we should do that because it's going to cause them less suffering, and that's a good thing.
Okay, so you're not making the argument. Let me see if I understand. You're not making the argument that xenogender is gender. You're saying that xenogender is an identity that we ought to respect.
Is that whether xenogender is gender or not, like super necessarily, I don't know if there's any way to actually know that. I don't know if there's any way to actually know if anyone's experiencing like an internal identity of gender, if they perfectly subsection that off from every other part of their personality, right? There's no way of knowing that.
But there is a way to know. There is a way to know.
How? How do we know that?
Because gender is not just an internal experience. It is
well,
also
then there's the outside experience, but I'm talking about the internal experience right now. So how do we know that somebody, the gender that they are expressing, right? How do we know for a fact that is their gender?
The internal expression, no, the internal expression is not in and of itself their gender.
The internal identity, there is a gender identity, and that's what I want to talk about. How do we know that that's actually their gender identity? How do we know that?
Wait, hold on. Okay, now we're going to get like super, okay, you ready for this? Because I feel like we're about to get into something deep, all right?
All right.
You're saying that we have an internal conception that is something.
Well, yeah,
right?
We have an internal feeling about the ways that we, for example, would like to express or like to be identified. Yes.
I think that the only way that we can have like that feeling of like validation is from society. If you're talking about an identity that is gender, and then you cut out the, I was about to say no. I would say like the outer two layers that I explained earlier. Not only the societal, like the outermost layer where everyone kind of has a shared understanding of characteristics that fit into the category of gender, but also the gendered expression. You're not talking about expressing outwardly someone's gender identity. You're talking about someone expressing outwardly some kind of internal feeling that they have that might involve their personality, that might involve their interests, that might also involve things that we would identify as gender, but these internal experiences themselves are not gender, right? Even the parts that make you feel more masculine or more feminine.
We've defined that actually as a form of gender. Yes, we've actually
no, not as a form of gender. It is an aspect, but not a form.
No, gender would be a result of those internal feelings. We have those internal feelings. That is like a true thing. Would you say?
Can you explain to me what you mean by result?
Like, if we didn't have these associations that we made of masculine and feminine, like internally, we had no ability to make those, then there would be no expression of gender, which means that we wouldn't have the concept of gender. It kind of follows from that original internal feeling.
If we just expressed everything outwardly, but we didn't have a social construction of gender, I'm trying to restate what you're saying. If we just like outwardly expressed all these feelings, but we didn't have a social conception of gender, right? We wouldn't have gender at all.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Okay, I'm trying to restate what I think you're saying. You're saying that we have feelings inside that we are trying to put outside, right?
So what I'm saying is that we have concepts of masculine and femininity. We know how that kind of relates to the ways that we feel internally. These are all like internal feelings. We have the internal groupings that we make in our minds. If we didn't have these, right, and we didn't have any need to express masculinity or femininity to any extent, like, then we wouldn't really make these groupings.
Okay, what I would say is the opposite. I would say that we would always have I don't think that you can. I can't imagine a human being that doesn't have an internal feeling that they want to express outwards, even if you're agender or something like that.
Specifically, like of masculinity and femininity. You cannot imagine that.
I cannot imagine someone who does not have any desire to present, unless you're suicidal, in which case you don't want to present anywhere, but like
you want to present with a noose around your neck, okay?
It's just,
I
guess.
A really cool necktie.
But what you're saying to me is like, unless we just like didn't outwardly express anything that we feel internally or didn't have the desire to, we wouldn't have gender. I would agree, but I would say that if we didn't have a societal conception of like all these characteristics that are gendered, then then everyone would just kind of like do whatever. We wouldn't have gender.
Well, I'm saying
we would have
that
internal experiences, but those kind of map onto the internal experiences map onto gender
that we have inform our gender identity. That's the way it would work internally. I don't even know how relevant this conversation is. I guess we could splice this for a little bit longer.
Sure, yeah. The reason that's relevant.
I mean, we don't actually need to, because it's not
Andrew's
really
bored.
No, I'm not bored.
No,
it's just that this
this is actually like very important. So if you think, okay,
well, then thread the needle for us, Sondsol, so that I can see it.
Trust me.
All right.
Hey, Andrew, I'm trying.
All
okay,
right.
so like I would say that if we don't have like society like telling us what to do, then we don't have gender, right? I would say that we always have that internal conception.
I think we have the internal conception. I think that we
but
have
not
that
of gender.
As far as it goes to wanting to present
inside.
masculinely or femininely within a society. If that didn't exist, we probably would do whatever. I don't know if that internal feeling would exist. I don't know about any of that. We're kind of working in like the realm of the complete unknown. I guess we can like theorize about it. I mean, we could try and talk to like a neurologist about it or something. No, I don't know who have expertise to talk about this. I don't think it's either you or me.
I agree,
but if that is the case,
my point. Because without society reinforcing what
I'm trying to get across is that we do have some kind of internal feeling. Right? We have an internal feeling about how we want to present masculinely or femininely.
That is informed by society.
Not particularly always informed by society. Like, for
I
example,
don't think that's possible. I don't think that any sociologist or gender theory person would ever agree
everything,
with that.
Let's say that we were to completely go to like a different place where people who felt masculinely would like want to like wear different things than what they would on this Earth. Like, let's call it Earth 2, right? So we make Earth 2, and then like we would take somebody from Earth 1, we would plop them on Earth 2, right? I think they would probably still want to present in a very similar way. Or if they did have an internal feeling of masculinity or femininity.
No,
They want
no,
to present in a
stop,
certain
stop,
way
stop.
that would
Back up.
particularly conform to those
What do you-
categorizations.
You gotta back up
yeah.
for me. You need to restate this hypothetical because I didn't even fucking understand it. You said there's an Earth 2.
So let's say we have
people
Earth 1,
wear
Earth 2.
female clothing.
All right, so we have Earth 1, we have Earth 2, okay? If somebody has the desire to be, for example, masculine on this Earth, right? We would take them, we would put them on Earth 2. They would probably want to present as, and they would like be grown up from the start all over again, right? The same conscious entity, right?
Oh,
they would
okay.
grow up for the all over again. I think they would probably want to present masculinely on Earth 2, even if it means different things.
Okay, got it.
I don't know about that.
Well, I think that we kind of see that throughout history, right? So like people who typically were, let's say like gender tends to correlate with sex. Most people are cis, right? Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, sorry. If we're
Yeah,
taking
so, like,
their
for example,
hypothetical, this
throughout
can't happen
history-
on Earth, right?
Well,
can't
no,
grow
but
up
I'm
twice.
gonna do it. I'm
Yeah,
gonna do
okay.
it from like history. Let's pull it to history. Okay? So like people who were typically like male tended to wear different things, like the 1950s than they do now, right?
Yeah.
That's true, right? And this kind of follows that through like different cultures, what's seen as masculine or feminine, that's also changes, but it all seems to correlate with sex still. So it seems to be that this is the case. That hypothetical I presented would follow the way that I said it would because of what we observe on this planet.
So you're saying that the Earth 2 would still have masculine features like that is associated with the same things that we associate with masculinity?
No, it would have completely, like, let's say it's complete opposite, right? So,
Okay,
like,
yeah,
for
I would
example,
say that the
long
reason
hair
that they
is
would-
seen as, like, incredibly masculine at this point in time, right?
Hey,
so, like,
fuck
people
you.
with short... Okay, well, I'm sorry, Sondsol. You're a soy boy libcuck, okay?
Yeah, that's true, that's
I have to
true.
break it to you. So,
Okay,
for
so,
example,
yeah, no, I
long
understand
hair
now.
is seen as, like, more feminine on this planet, but on the, like, let's say Earth 2, it's seen as more masculine, all right? And
Yeah,
so when
okay,
we
yeah,
raise-
I understand.
Yeah.
My thing is, yeah, I would agree with you, but that speaks to my point that society
Well,
influences.
Not entirely, but I understand, like, where like I think we're just trying to express the same thing differently. That's the only way I can like get around this. I don't even know if we can function
Yeah.
with like these concepts of gender. Like the normal person could function without these concepts of gender. We're like getting super in depth into a
No,
topic
but,
that I don't
like,
think particularly informs the conversation that much. From
I don't know how you don't think that it informs the conversation when we're talking about someone's internal conception of gender, and then you're talking about people who are using
Well-
metaphors to explain an internal conception of gender that they can't explain with words, but we already have ideas and
Well,
characteristics
because
and
there
all
are
these things that fit into the
concepts that kind of
into the-
exist, which we don't have like perfect words for, right?
but we do have like
And we kind of create. We had to
defined
create these
characteristics
words.
within these.
We had to create all of these
categorizations, right?
words. We had to create all of these words. We had to make up by all of these words. So at least at some point in time, there were like words that didn't adequately explain the reality that we lived in, right? So that would
I
probably.
feel like you keep
continue
on
to
making
follow.
my point. I feel like you keep on.
I don't
making
think
the
I'm
points that
making your point. Like,
I feel like the exact example that you
if
used
I'm
a
making
couple
your
of minutes
point,
ago,
this seems to like
Yeah,
follow super hand in hand with the idea that like, so if somebody like has these internal feelings and they want to like people to recognize them,
but they're
that,
informed
like,
by society, and then society does not inform us what vampire gender or goth gender or bitch gender
they might
are.
be, yeah, they might be informed by society. Of course, like the ways that people are going to be raised might inform them. Yeah.
No, they do.
Well, but there is some kind of internal like experience of like what you would like to present as, correct?
I think that is
Like, there's some
informed
kind
by
of
society
variation.
too. Yes.
I'm not even gonna lie. I think that we're so in depth into a concept that doesn't even fucking matter right now.
No, it's like the entire thing. Because if
No,
if
it's not
you
the
think
entire
that-
thing.
No,
Okay.
because you're saying
So,
that someone has an internal
let's-
conception. Hold on, wait, really quick. You're
All right.
saying that someone can be born with the internal conception or have something happen in like prenatal or some shit like that where they get the internal conception of vampireness.
But
right?
their
The
internal conception would be like informed by what that concept would be at that given point in time for like a large amount of people, right? Or if
Yes,
even,
I'm
like,
saying I'm
so like
and I'm
for example,
saying,
if words meant different things, we'd use different words to describe things, but those things would still be there. That's
Okay, but I'm
essentially my
trying to-
entire point. I
Okay,
don't know how
what
we're
I'm
on this
trying to say
topic.
is-
I'm
No,
completely
no.
lost.
Because
in
what
the
you're
thought right now.
saying, because what you're saying is someone that is identifying as vampire gender is going through life that with this internal conception of vampireness inside of them, but then they get this like word that they identify with their internal experience, and they're like, yeah, that's what my gender is, as opposed to society
yeah,
and things
no,
that they're
if words
interested
meant
in, all
different
informing
things-
what their personality
if
and their
words
likes and
meant
their
different
aesthetic choices
things-
and all that shit is.
If
right?
words,
and then
if,
they
no,
express
okay,
that.
people, no. So if words meant different things, we'd use different words to express those things.
Say it again.
If words meant different things, we use different words to express those things, right?
Yeah, that's why most people don't identify themselves as goth gender. They just like wear goth clothes and fucking like chain wallets and shit, right?
Okay. All
As
right,
opposed to identifying as goth gender.
Okay, so my point would still stand that if the words meant different things, we'd use different words to describe those things, right? So if a majority of people who were male were raised to be or like instilled upon certain ideas or certain concepts, and that would be what we labeled as masculine, we use that word to describe whatever those people tend towards.
Okay. Right.
Yes. So in a place where words mean different things, they are used differently. That's the entire
that
point
has
of the hypothetical.
nothing to do with what I just said.
What did you just say then? Like, I'm trying my best. I'm genuinely trying my best to like grasp what you're saying.
Okay.
Maybe you need to use a metaphor, buddy.
Yeah,
maybe you need to use a metaphor.
Maybe I need a metaphor. Okay, Andrew, I'm going to try and do this one more time, but I think that we have hit the bridge. Okay, this is my attempt. Okay, so
okay, buddy.
We have categories. All right.
Yeah.
We have categories of aesthetic. We have categories of interests, of personalities, of all these different things, and we also have the category of gender. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So to say that you can pull from one of these other categories and apply it to gender doesn't really speak to that gender. It speaks more to an interest in that category as opposed to the actual gender, because you would be pulling from a scale of masculine to feminine.
Understand what that person internally feels, or if that like fits the slot of gen. I don't think there's any way for us to possibly understand that.
Do we have to perfectly understand everyone's internal conception of gender?
If we're going to say that that is not the case definitively, we probably have to understand it to a very high degree, which I don't think is possible. So, like, for example, like I couldn't tell you exactly what you think.
So I would say that we have.
So
I would say that like I generally am more masculine, so I identify as a man.
So, for example,
I also
can
am
tell
like
you what
into
words you're
nerdy
saying,
shit, right?
And the ways that I would interpret them, or the ways that they would colloquially be interpreted. I have no idea exactly what you mean. We express everything through the prism of like language, for example. Yeah.
Yes, but that doesn't. You're responding with a linguistic argument to me saying that we have different categories and the pulling from one
this
category
all has to do with linguistics. You're splicing the semantics of the word gender. Yes, this all has to do with linguistics.
I'm saying
this is like a This is like a completely like linguistics argument where we're like taking a little bit of ethics. We're trying to apply.
What I'm saying
is
you're saying that you can
interchangeably. This is a linguistics argument. How do we get this far?
What you're trying
we
to
should
do
use without making a linguistics argument? I'm having a different argument than you are right now.
You are having another argument.
All right.
Let me be more clear. Okay, I'm super frustrated, Andrew. I got to do this. Okay, so you're saying,
then you better thread the motherfucker so you can understand it.
Don't mean anything. We can just change the meanings of words as we see fit. Because
no, I didn't say we could change the meaning of words as we see fit. We should probably. Well, I mean, we can. We have the ability to, of course. Yes, we do change the meaning of words. In fact, as we see fit. Like if something is better to be expressed with different words, we will use different words to express them. That is how we use language. This is totally true.
But not on an individual level.
Well, no, it's almost exactly on an individual level. How do we make like large scale change if not on an individual level? People start using words to express certain things, and that's the way that they get adopted. We don't like. I don't have to like call up Oxford Dictionary to like verify my next new slang term. That's not like something I do.
No, it would be like a gradual process. But you're
but a gradual process has to start with somebody, does it not?
Xenogenders are entirely like up to an individual to explain that would not be a societal change whatsoever.
So how do you possibly start a gradual process without an individual? It doesn't start
because Xenogenders aren't talking about
the world spinning.
Because
right?
Xenogenders
it's not like the world spinning.
It's not like saying non-binary.
What it is actually somebody starts. I understand that you're dying inside, but please bear with me for the conversation.
Non-binary.
I'm fucking dying inside.
Really quick. Okay, I just have to make this. This is actually going to be my final statement, because you're saying that like we're saying that like
all right,
a Xenogender is speaking to an individual's internal conception of to use a metaphor.
Of course it does.
So it's always going to be an
individualized experience. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to express that through language, and that individuals will use language to try and express things.
Private languages don't work, right?
What do you mean private languages don't work? Well, what do you mean by private language? Do we mean like the actual meaning of the word private language, or are we using like the one that we established previously?
The one that you used earlier.
Oh, so like the word that only like one person could possibly understand, that probably has no meaning. There's no real reason in using a word that only you understand. So you might wake a word.
A private language about gender. So I'm going to identify myself as blanket gender.
No, what we do, okay, hold on for a second. So what we do is we might use a word and we'll explain what that word means, and then other people will use that word. And the craziest thing is we're going to be able to communicate things more effectively. That's how we make language, Sondsol. That's literally how we don't discover language.
You're dismissing the idea
open the tomb of language, read
point.
the English book, and just like
you're
flip through the Oxford Dictionary and figured out
or
like
you're
everything.
denying the concept of a private language. You're saying, well, it's not
private language that you're talking about that doesn't work. No,
Okay.
You've had a lot of time to get a point out. I was listening to you rant and rave for a very long time, dude. I'm trying to like express what private language means that you say doesn't work. Private language means something that only one person ever understands. If more than one people understand it at a certain point in time, it is no longer a private language, and therefore it would work. It would work as an expression. Therefore, the way that we create language,
two people using gender in the same way, and nobody else having any idea about it.
That's not private language. No, it's not a private language. Like, do I have to refresh you on what a private language is? I mean, we could look it up. I'm totally willing. We can Google it. I can read directly off of like any philosophy site ever. You're wrong on this. You're descriptively wrong on this. You don't know what a private language is.
What is a social construct?
What does a social construct matter? You're talking about a private language. Why are we talking about social constructs?
I'm running down.
No, what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the private language. I want to talk about the private language. You brought up the private language.
All right,
don't monkey me. I want to talk about the private language point. Please don't move off of it.
Start from social construction because
social constructs, like what are social constructs? No, I want to talk about private language. What does the word private language mean?
We're gonna get there.
Well, no, we were already there. Now you want to go into another topic. I don't want to go into another topic. I want to talk about private language. You brought it up. Let's talk about private language.
Because
I want to get to the point.
A language is a social construct, right? The social construct means
yes,
something that,
of course, it's a social construct.
Like a mutual understanding of all.
So, how do you think social constructs are made?
In a society,
how do you think a social construct is made? We don't just discover social constructs. People have to like create. Like someone has to start using a word in a certain way, or create a word and then start using it, and then other people will learn that word, learn what it means, and start using it. That is like super basic. This is like linguistics 101.
But you're not advocating for something that is an individual, or you're not advocating for just expanding the category of gender by saying, well, this person is going to.
I'm advocating for respecting xenogenders. That's what I'm advocating for. I don't know what you think I'm advocating for.
Because you're saying that someone can have their own individual conception and like expect society to understand that conception of what gender is, as long as they explain it, right? But that's not just like adding to and creating like an expansion to the social construct of what gender is, right? That is having your own individualized gender, your own individualized. We'll say instead of saying individual language, we'll say individual gender.
No.
Yes.
So every single person.
What a fucking xenogender is.
So no, every single person probably has their own internal experience of gender. This is like super. Do you think that like people have like carbon copies of each other?
I agree. Oh, hold on. My
are those unique genders now?
1 second.
Okay, buddy. I didn't know we would get to the point where the headphones give up.
There we go.
Okay.
We're an hour and a half. We're about an hour and a half in.
Sure.
We do got to get to the Q&A because we can't go all
right, Sondsol, just so you know, okay? Everything I've said here is we're debating, okay? After this, we're going to hug, and it's going to be great after
I love you to death, Bunk. You're the most intelligent person that I've argued with about the xenogenders thing, like very obviously, but at the same time, like we're talking about like a social construct that people could have an individual concept of, right?
Yeah.
And then oh, okay.
So what exactly? What's the point? Can we get to like maybe a final statement? Like I don't know if we're going to bridge this.
So this will be
like you're really heated right now. I'm kind of getting heated right now. I don't think we're going to get like a meaningful conclusion.
I don't think we're not going to get a meeting. This will be my final. I'm finishing, motherfucker. Okay, I'm so finished. Okay,
please don't finish on stream. That's against TOS. Please do not finish on stream. That's sexual content. You can't do that.
I came like 45 minutes ago. I have a long refractory period. So here's the thing. I don't think that an individual can individually say, this is my internal conception of gender. This is the word that I'm going to apply to it. And then have that be in the category of gender. This is something that someone is using as a metaphor for their gender, but I don't think that it actually is a gender, right? Now, interpersonally, I think that probably we should be polite to people that we're interacting with. We don't want to be like mean and shit like that, but we're not like, we're validating something to them that is not within the construct that we have around gender, right? We're adding, like, we're Frankensteining different categories together into gender. And because in my belief is that we have like a weird thing about gender ever since Tumblr, but like we're Frankensteining all these things into gender instead of just saying like we have a spectrum of masculinity to femininity, right? And you can be somewhere on this scale, and then we have other characteristics that people can have. We can have all these different things, and you can be all of these different things, but like those things aren't inside of gender, right? And that's the last part that we're on, and that I don't think we're ever going to fucking get to a meaningful conclusion.
What I would say is
I
I have no way of knowing what, like, internally, maybe someone associates those things with masculine and feminine. I cannot know that. There is no way for me to know that. I can't take like a mallet, knock their head, like look inside and say, hey, no, that's the right view of gender. You understand it. You've got it, buddy. But what I can do is I can understand that that's what they're expressing. That's the best I can do, is understand what they're expressing and try and respect that accordingly. And therefore, we've basically concluded the xenogender argument in my view. That would be my final statement. Thanks for having the conversation, I guess.
Yeah, I had fun.
Okay. And it was a fun conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I genuinely like you. This conversation is just very fucking frustrating.
Yeah, we gotta.
Oh boy,
we gotta.
Gender conversations are always super fun. Okay, they never
get
heated ever.
To the Q&A.
All right.
So we do things a little differently at the Crucible, as probably both of you know. When the closing statements are done, we consider the debate over. Doesn't mean you guys won't get back into it. We do have a caller who's waiting, who wants to call in and ask some questions as well. Might have further callers before I'm done with the Q&A portion.
Who is it?
I think that looks like Dylan Blaze back there as a call-in.
Okay.
So first and foremost, Bunk, how many Destiny debates have you watched? Over 100?
I've actually watched every single Destiny debate. I actually have Destiny kidnapped right now. I interrogate him before every single debate and get every single argument that he ever possibly has. That's why I'm arguing the Destiny argument in this this discussion. You've heard me argue in favor of what Destiny believes here. Every single time I say something, you basically can credit to Destiny because we are the exact same person. Thank you for asking.
If you guys,
I appreciate it.
If you guys didn't know it, Bunk actually has a speaker in his throat that Destiny is speaking into on the other end with a walkie-talkie, and he's just kind of mouthing the words, lip syncing, if you will. If you go back about the 30-minute mark, you can actually see that the lips don't sync up perfectly.
Yeah, I'm actually like Destiny, like wearing a skin suit, basically. Like, I agree with Destiny and everything.
He had to kill a xenogender person to steal that skin too. So it's like extra ironic.
Dude, super fucked up. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I understand you're not making his arguments, but you have almost 100% mannerism.
Yeah,
linked up,
that too. But I've also kidnapped Destiny and study every single one of his mannerisms. You understand? Yeah.
You know, this is actually the first time that someone has been given that, like, someone has said that to my debate opponent and not to me. It's usually I'm trying to pretend.
You see,
to be
I
Destiny
talk quickly. I talk with my hands, and I'm a libcock. That's basically the Destiny handbook. I'm done. I'm Destiny.
No, that's not the Destiny handbook.
Yeah, it is. I'm not taking any objections.
How many times have you debated with Destiny?
All the times. Every single one.
So not once?
Well, we were on stream together. I tried to get Destiny on for a Xenogender debate.
So the thing is, it's like, look, I know the guy's mannerisms, and you got the mannerisms, like they've been studied. Well, so I'm just
I've studied the mannerisms. I've studied them, all of them. Yes,
okay.
You got me totally.
Yeah. So Bunk, at the 20-minute mark, you said that gender is made up to Sondsol in reference to his goth gender. Isn't all gender made up?
Yes.
Okay.
Gotcha. But like, to understand what gender is, like, if somebody has a gender, I kind of have to talk to them. I'm really experienced in internal like gender identity, so I kind of talk to other people, and that's how I understand gender. For example, if somebody came to me, like really really young, and asked me, "Hey, what does masculine mean?" I'd be like, "Well, you just made that up. What the fuck? What does that mean?" And obviously, we'd have a conversation afterward. Yeah. So some presents me with a new word. I'm gonna ask them what it means. Yeah.
Yeah. So
wait. You're saying that 3-year-old running up to you saying like, "What is masculine?" You would say that they just made that word up.
No, I was saying if you came up to me as like like 5 years old, okay, and I had very little understanding of what any of this meant, okay, you were to say,
Oh,
hey,
okay, gotcha.
that's very masculine. I would be like, what? What? Are you fucking crazy? What does that word mean? You just made that up. Yeah.
Okay, so at the 30-minute mark, you say there's no way to experience vampire gender, Sondsol. Can you tell me, how does a man experience a woman's gender?
Because I think that we have an internal experience of something that we're trying to convey that maps on to both, it maps on to internal experiences, which inform, or how about this? I always start from the outer and then go inward because it's easier to explain that way. I think that there is a society that we have that has mapped onto certain like secondary sex characteristics, aesthetic choices, etc. You know, different genders, right? That we like kind of understand in society. So we have like long hair, you know, boobs, etc. And we know how to interact with each other, like with that. We know to call someone he or she. We know to call someone.
Yeah, but wouldn't you theoretically know how to interact with a vampire then, based on like their lore and this and that? You can't actually experience it yourself, right?
Well, I hadn't gotten to the second layer though. So
Okay.
we have the societal conception, right? And then we have all these, characteristics that we have, right? And then we have the internal conception of like how we feel inside. We have the societal aspect of how we see people, treat people with those characteristics. These things kind of all play together to give someone what their gender identity is, right? So like I'm a fairly masculine person. I would say that I'm a guy, right? But like in a society where like if I grew up in a society where like men all wore skirts, oh shit, Scotland, they have fucking skirts for men, kilts, right? Like that's a very masculine thing there. But like in like 2022 United States, wearing skirts is not a very, very masculine thing to do, right? So like in different societies, like masculinity could mean like a different thing, or like the aesthetic choices, but the internal conception, right, is still there, and how I want to be treated by society is still there, right? So I would probably try to because of the way that I want to be treated in society and because of my internal conception, I would probably express in the way that society, like, you know, puts on to people who want to present masculine. And I would probably wear a skirt in that situation.
Okay. Bunk, without giving an Adderall-laced answer, can you answer if you take Adderall?
So only like on occasion. I specifically took like an extra amount for this debate specifically. I should be thrown out because I'm using performance-enhancing drugs right now.
Wait, Bung, unironically, I do take Adderall, all right, because I have like severe ADHD. Do you actually, or are you
I
like,
do not take Adderall. When I do, I have autism and ADHD, and I also talk pretty naturally quickly, which is kind of like a thing. And it's like, haha, you're addicted to Red Bull. I do have a bad Red Bull addiction, but that's like beside the point. Or like, haha, you do Adderall, and it's very funny to me every single time. It's like I've never heard the joke before, and people should keep making it because it gets funnier each time.
I think I grew up in the.
I thought it was funny, but
I grew up in
Well,
the
you
dark
thought it was
South,
funny.
so-
You're like what, 40? Yeah, you're like the target demographic. Okay,
I mean,
I nailed it
well,
on the head there.
wait. I'm sorry.
You are like 40. No, you are like 40. This is politics content. You are the target audience.
Yeah,
There was no insult here. Like, what do you?
I'm just curious though. Is humor only subjected to like 17-year-olds' interpretations?
No, humor is fully subjective, and in your subjective opinion, the 40-year-old mindset, okay, that was funny, and that means that it landed with its target demographic.
Which wasn't you?
No, am I 40?
Yeah, it landed with.
Well, I don't know.
Am I 40?
I'm just curious. How would you?
Do I look 40 to you? This is like the first time I've ever heard.
Well,
it.
I can't tell how old you are or what gender you are, bro. I don't know.
What gender I am?
I don't know.
I am
I don't
actually a
know.
6,000-year-old dragon. Okay, you are talking to like a nearly immortal being right now.
That's a gender.
No, it's just my age. Okay, that's the official age reveal.
In D&D. Oh, by the way, Bunk, is attack helicopter a xenogender?
Can I identify as an attack helicopter right now? That'd be cool.
I'm just asking.
I think they're really cool. I don't feel like debating individual xenogenders right now. I've done my debate amount for today. I've hit my quota. Okay.
So, but one of the reasons that I get so frustrated
hit me up on
with this debate
another
is that
time.
Well, I don't.
we don't have to argue
I don't
about
understand. These
It could be a xenogender. Yes, if that's what you want me to answer your question like directly. I don't want to like spice semantics though. Yeah, it could be a xenogender.
So shut up, Sondsol. I'm not done with the Q&A yet.
Wait, I want to ask.
No,
you
let
something.
Sondsol. It's a
able to,
Q&A,
Sondsol?
and you're not letting people ask questions.
Yeah,
it's a
you'll be
very,
able
very,
to.
very. I don't even know if it's a question. It's just like this is one of the reasons that this conversation really frustrates the fuck out of me because I have people unironically arguing with me, calling me transphobic because they think that I, by their own admission, should be validating attack helicopter gender, right? That's something that I've been told multiple times that yes, this is something that we should be validating if someone actually identifies in that way. And I would say that by ceding that stupid fucking argument to the right, we're actually harming trans people in the long run. And by maybe giving some people some very like small utilitarian like buffs in like their individual life, we're actually harming the
utilitarian
broader
buffs.
Yeah,
utilitarian
like
buff.
a med
Sorry,
pack.
I've been playing video.
They got like quad damage. Okay.
Sorry. You know,
No.
you guys understood
So
what I meant. That's
my
why
position
language
on that.
is important.
I feel
right?
like
We
you
all
understand my position because you've already watched the debate where someone kind of brings up this point to me. I think it's very important to have consistent positions. I think it's very, very hard to argue like against xenogenders while being in favor of like of transgender people. I think that's why the argument's brought up. And I think it's really important for me to have consistent positions all throughout. I would not call you transphobic. I think that'd be a wild, like people would interpret that word completely differently than like anything that you are. I think that's fucking crazy. I think that people who do that are fucking crazy. I know I think it kind of actually improves our arguments to be consistent, though. That's what I would say. It can sound a little bit crazy.
Inconsistent to say that someone is like misgendering someone, right? That would be by definition like a transphobic thing to do, right?
Well, not necessarily in like every single situation. I hold very much so adamantly against like universal principles, right? So I would say that like under certain conditions or like the motivations, for example, why you're doing things, that's very important, right? For example,
I'm gonna have to pick your brain at
if I call somebody like he or him when they go by she, her, that's misgendering. But I don't think I'd be immediately called transphobic. That seems like a little bit of a misapplication of that word. And we can kind of pick what transgender means sometime. I'm totally down to do that. Or not transgender, what like being transphobic means sometime. I'm totally down to do that with you. It's an entirely separate discussion. I've had multiple different discussions.
No, the thing that I really want to pick your brain on in the future is like, you said you think that consistency is very important for our arguments, but you also advocate against, or you don't like subscribe to
universally. So consistent logic is necessary, but that doesn't mean like we consistent, like if something is like in this situation, there's no other conditions, right? Then the logic has to be applied consistently, right? So if the conditions don't change it, there has to be consistent logic between these positions. However, if there's different conditions, obviously what we're going to say about certain scenarios like is going to be different, right? So like for example, let's say that like you could like let's do a rape hypothetical because I'm feeling spicy today. Let's say you could rape a baby and save the entire world.
Destiny. Oh my god.
Yeah. Let's bring out the rape cage. No. So let's say you like could rape a baby and save the entire world, right? Sure, that'd probably be a good action. I'd probably say that's a good action. But, okay, if it was just raping a baby, I'd say that's bad. But I don't think it's an inconsistency. I think I'm applying the same logic to situations with different conditions.
Okay, so let me get to these other questions. We'll never get through them.
All right.
Bunk, your argument is that if a person can't express how they feel based on whatever current gender category you put their identity in, then whatever word they come up with essentially expresses that is what matters.
No, what I'm saying is the pronouns that they would like to be called by, barring external factors, which completely like tip off a utilitarian analysis to the other way. For example, like N-word gender, like those would be like something that we ought to respect. That's what I'm arguing, and I'm arguing that there's no way you could possibly like know for a fact, is this like your real gender? Like I can't crack up with somebody's head. And, like,
so what if they define their gender by words that apply to another gender concisely? Should they default to that other gender?
I think that you probably should. Yeah, like if that's exactly what you mean, and you're just making up new words, and like I could like crack open your brain. I knew for a fact that like this is what you meant, and it's being expressed just in a different way that's more like understood. Of course, you should express yourself that way.
Well,
I agree that people should use language.
You wouldn't be cracking open their brain. They just concisely told you the definition of what they consider
so
their gender.
to the best of my ability, if I could understand what somebody was saying, I could advise that they use another gender. But if they told me, hey, no, you don't get it, that's not right, I would only have to say like, okay, I must have misunderstood what you were trying to say, because there's no way for me to like perfectly know what somebody's saying. It's always going to be expressed through the prism of language in every single situation. That's just.
And how much utility would that be, or would that have, if every single individual created their own gender expression?
If every single individual, we already all create our own gender expression. That's already like a thing that happens
with a new word.
Like with a new word, probably not like the most if everybody like identify with their own like their own super specific one. That's why people are going to probably identify with things that will, like, if there's a significant difference, people will generally try to identify or in a different way, right? People are going to probably tend towards, if someone could like be like hugely benefited by identifying with other pronouns and not like specifically xenogenders, and it would be like very little downside. I feel like that's pretty natural that they would like tend towards that. For example, people like have the ability to just make up new languages and start talking in them, but it doesn't generally serve people purpose, so we don't see people doing that.
So what if the gender that you expressed was a racial slur, Bunk? You went over that already, like the N-word.
Yeah, I've already went over that.
Yeah, I just said that.
But if it was in private, I would take it as a free N-word pass. I would hope that it's a free pass, okay?
Yeah, shut up. Let me ask the question. Should a black person respect it? And you said no, because it would cause more harm. What if not calling them that would contribute to self-termination?
Well, okay, if they were like likely to kill themselves, like 99% certainty, or like a large degree of certainty that they would kill themselves, of course I would call them that. Yeah, 100%.
Well, so Sondsol asked you about this, and that was the answer.
Yeah, that was the answer that I gave. Yeah.
But he asked you something else that was specific, which is, can you demonstrate it?
Can I demonstrate that they're going to kill themselves?
No, I mean, can you demonstrate the utility and the harm either way?
I can demonstrate it to the same degree we can demonstrate any other kind of utility, right?
Okay, well then do it.
Yeah, so sure. How do we know for like a fact people are like suffering?
Well, you don't.
Well, you don't, but we have reasons to believe people are suffering, right? If I were to like super deep meta ethics, we can go like.
Would you use data?
How do I use data like prove that somebody's suffering?
Well,
right?
I would basically utilize self-reporting, right?
Yeah, well, you'd utilize self-reporting. That's what they're doing.
Okay, so great. So then there's a way to demonstrate it. So can you demonstrate it?
Yeah, self-reporting. So somebody.
Okay, so then can you demonstrate? If a large amount of people, in this case,
a large amount of people would self-report that the N-word causes them distress. For example, there's societal consequences.
Can you demonstrate that right now, though?
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
This is my question.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay.
Self-reporting.
Give me like a little bit of time. All right. So, generally speaking,
you're not actually gonna give me any data, though, right?
Well, what data? Like
self-reported data.
I can't. I don't have the N-word study on hand. I'm sorry.
So it's totally subjective, then, right?
Yeah, it's totally subjective.
All self-reporting is going to be
say the N-word right now, and it's going to you're going to destroy it. You're going to own the libs, okay?
First of all, the self-reporting would not be perhaps whatever the person self-reporting is subjective, but the data of what they self-report. Shut up. But the data of what they self-reported would not be subjective.
Yeah,
right?
so sure. So I think that we would all agree. I mean, maybe we have to go with like super in depth into this. I can pull up like specific examples. I don't know if there's a qualitative study on like the effects of saying the N-word, right? But generally speaking, I've had multiple different people self-report to me that it was like it would be like harmful, or they feel like some kind of distress if I say the N-word. If I say the N-word publicly on Twitter, there's probably going to be some kind of backlash for that, right? This seems to like conform. If we look at like how markets kind of work, companies tend to like not like people just saying the N-word randomly on their premises. It hurts, for example, the product they're going to be selling. The reason it would hurt the product they're going to be selling is because people just generally don't like to hear the N-word like repeatedly said. We can go like through all these different proofs. I don't know if they're particularly necessary. I don't know why I'm being like asked like, hey, can you like statistically prove that the N-word is like not something I should be screaming in the middle of like a town square?
Well,
like,
that's not what you're being asked. You're just building a straw man. So let me tell you what you're specifically
what you're asking
being
me is to prove.
How about I specifically tell you what you're being asked, and then you don't have to assume.
Yeah.
So what you're specifically being asked is if there's a way that you yourself can quantify this, like Sondsol asked you, so that we can see which has the most utility.
Which has the most utility?
Yeah.
Is there a way to like specifically quantify what has the most utility, like off the top of my head?
In the particular case of whether or not like saying the hard R, or
we would have to assess it to the best of our ability.
Dude, you have got to let me finish what I'm saying, and then you can respond to it.
All right.
So specifically,
I feel like I've said enough to demonstrate what I'm saying. But sure.
Gotcha. So you're muted now, and I'm just finished. What you're being asked here concisely is if you can demonstrate that the hard R is going to cause more harm than not using the xenogender pronoun with any type of actual data or utility metric that we can see and quantify. That's all I'm asking you.
I cannot demonstrate off the top.
Answer?
Okay, so I cannot demonstrate off the top of my head like the exact effect. Well, that
You
is
weren't asked to. Why? What is wrong with you? Why don't you listen to what the fuck
because
I'm
you
saying
asked
to
me
you?
to
Andrew,
demonstrate something.
yes,
and
Andrew,
that's
I'm with
exactly what
Bunk
you're
on this
asking.
one, okay?
With
Bunk.
data, did the word data not?
Data of
How many
the
times do I have
N-word.
to say it?
There we go. I'm with Bunk on this one. I don't understand what the fuck you're asking either, because it sounds like you're asking him for fucking statistics and data on the fucking whether or not the N-word is like harmful. That's what it sounds like you're asking.
I'm asking if there's a way for you to be able to actually quantify that in a way that we can see.
Well, that's why I
I've
didn't press him, because I don't think that
done
he
that.
has.
I've
We were
done
having
that to the best of my
like a
ability.
conceptual conversation, and I didn't expect him to have like on hand like a study that
I
like says that
don't.
the N-word is harmful, right? That's why I like moved off of that, because I don't think there's a way for me to press him on that in a way that would be like good faith.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's good faith. There's a hedonic metric, right?
The hedonic metric.
Sorry,
we
I'm
can look
retarded.
into
What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, like there's no way you would expect me to have this like kind of data on hand. Maybe this data exists, maybe it doesn't. It tends to be that I would use certain like proofs through like my epistemology that I have reason to believe that people don't like be like hearing the N-word randomly said. Yeah, like for example, again, you will say large societal backlash if you say the N-word. That's like a really easy example for it, right? Like for now, I couldn't prove like what has the best optics like objectively. We're having a like conceptual conversation. I think it's like really unfair to like expect me to have like this data point on hand.
I don't
maybe it
expect
exists.
you to have anything.
Maybe
I'm
it,
just asking you if it can be demonstrated.
maybe
via
it can.
data.
Maybe it cannot.
Okay, thanks. Like that's really easy.
Okay, if that was your question, I completely misunderstood you, and I went full retard there. Okay, I've been like debating for 2 hours. You can't do this.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So if it causes me distress to call somebody a vampire, or causes me distress, and it also causes them distress to be called a vampire, who do we default to?
Who do we default to? I mean, like through like my. Like, if we were to, like, super meta-ethics, I defend the standpoint of egoism, not, like, full utilitarianism. But my egoism tends to, like, default to similar to the utilitarianism. Sorry, because I tend to, like, feel empathy for other human beings. I don't want them to suffer, right? If we were to, like, super based on that, right? And it caused you could, like, feel that you would, like, get caused more harm calling somebody that than, like, just not, like... not doing so, I would default to myself, for example, in that situation. That would be my answer. If we want to get like super meta ethics, I don't want to do that because that is super AIDS conversation. I hate it. Yeah.
I like meta ethical discussions myself, but Bunk, why is distress important?
Because I feel empathy. I mean, again, we're getting into meta ethics. I feel empathy for other human beings. It makes me feel bad. I do not want to feel bad. I want to feel good. Things are good because I value them. Therefore, I do not value people feeling bad, and I don't want them to feel bad. There you go. That's like the super basic.
So there's
axioms.
you had said that there's no metaphysical perfect concept of a woman. You both agreed to that. But there is a perfect physical concept. So why does it need to be metaphysical?
Well, how do you know like that's for like 100% certain like the correct woman?
How do I know that that's a biological woman?
Well, not biological woman. We're talking about the social category of woman. Those are like different things.
Well, no, but that's not my question. My question
Okay,
is,
well, your
that
question is not what we agreed on.
If there's a perfect physical concept, why does there need to even be a metaphysical concept?
So what's the perfect physical concept of a woman?
Somebody who produces ova, or has XX chromosomes.
So,
or there's essentially three different criteria.
So these are like completely different criteria. So like, how do you know like it's for sure a woman?
Because they fit those criteria.
So they have to fit all these criteria, or like one of these criteria, or
well,
like
if you fit one of those criteria.
Wait, hold on. Am I supposed to be the moderator now?
No, I'm just.
No, we're asking questions.
Asking,
Look, we're just asking. We're just asking questions here. Okay.
Okay. So do you agree that there can be several different criteria that something can fall into to be the same thing?
Like completely different criteria. I don't think that describes the same thing. I don't know how you would ever know that like you have the perfect definition of that thing. I think that'd be like a colloquial definition that we just kind of agree on, but it's not like metaphysically like a true thing.
I'm not saying metaphysically. I'm just saying physical.
Yeah.
So we could say physical.
I don't know if like any physical thing is like objective. That like if we really want to get into it. Like how do we like determine for a fact that like one thing is different from another thing, and that like the entire universe isn't just like one thing? How do we like make those differentiations? How do we make those distinctions? These all seem to be like normative choices that we have to make. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I won't get into that anymore with you. And then we just had a super chat come in for $5 from made by Jim Bob. He said, Bunk, if I identify as someone with extreme constant pain, would you administer euthanasia for me?
If you identified, like if you self-reported to me that you had extreme constant pain, and you wanted that to happen, I would have no problem with you getting euthanasia, buddy. You go for
only
that.
That one specific dude. Only that one specific dude.
Only that one specific dude, because
Anyone
that
else?
Question pisses me off, and I would like them dead regardless. That like would fulfill my preferences. I'm not saying like that you should kill yourself. I'm saying that like I wouldn't be object to it.
He's not saying that he wants you to kill him.
I'm not instructing you to do anything. Don't
He's
kill
saying
yourself.
that he would kill you given the opportunity because you asked him to.
Yes, these are different statements. Yeah.
Okay. What's up, caller? You've got a minute. Answer your question or ask your questions. You've got a couple of minutes here.
You would be the type to wear a fucking coat like that. Jesus fucking Christ.
I was just wearing it, and I realized it would be weird to get undressed before I sat down in front of a camera for a bunch of people. Okay.
You have a shirt on underneath.
Yes, this whole outfit goes together. I mean, I could just.
It's like one of those like fucking infant things where it's just like, oh, you just like slip it on over the head, and it's just like.
No, I'm wearing shirts under. Do you want me to just like start?
Hey, I don't know. It just seems like a really
exactly.
Weird
Shut the fuck up.
Jump
Shut the
onto
fuck
a
up.
fucking stream with, you know.
I'm wearing clothes, okay? Like, I think it's weird for you to look like a budget Aquaman, but like, here we are, sitting here fucking hours
Listen,
later,
I'm not
right?
even a budget Aquaman, all right? I'm Aquaman on meth. Come
Did
on.
that land with his target audience, Monk?
I have no idea.
What is the target audience? What kind of content do you make?
Well,
Dylan?
it wasn't
Somebody?
40-year. It wasn't 40. It didn't apply to the 40-year-olds because I didn't see Andrew get a chuckle from it. But Andrew, you're a stone cold bastard. You know that?
I was chuckling on the inside. Go ahead.
Thank you. All right, so I just wanted to ask you a few questions, Bunk, because this seemed like delusional to me, right? You're making like utilitarian arguments. Mother Mary in the sky. Holy fuck. Okay. If you are making, I just hate being patronized. Okay. There we go.
I'm not patronizing.
If you are making
I
hate being called bud. Just okay.
I call everyone bud. All right, you're not my bud
Don't call
anymore.
me bud.
You're not my bud anymore.
Exactly.
We're not friends.
All right.
We're
Now, I'm going to talk. I'm talking.
Wow.
I'm making this point. I'm making this point really quickly,
Okay,
but I just want to say, like, okay, basically, so if you're making utilitarian arguments, but you're outright rejecting the usefulness of language and the fact that we have we have a dichotomous split of gender and how we represent gender for a reason. There's a
I never
purpose
rejected that there's usefulness in language. I reaffirm there's usefulness in language. Like, I don't know what
you
argument
seem to be rejecting this by acknowledging this notion and allowing it to exist in society. This is a sort of delusional concept that has nothing to do with gender. Do you know what the prefix xeno means?
Please inform me. What is the prefix xeno?
It means alien. The prefix xeno means alien. And this is completely alien to the conceptualization of gender. So why would we acknowledge it?
Why would we acknowledge it? Because we tend to I don't want people to suffer from my use of language. And it's generally something that I don't want.
So have we any empirics that actually prove the efficacy of this? Because there's
so
no
if someone self-reports,
there's not a significant amount of xenogendered people that actually prove that the complete restructuring of language is actually going to be a functional and practical thing.
Complete restructuring of language.
We absolutely do, because we're outright denying a concept.
From the top to the bottom. That's crazy. That's
let's just take a long-standing principle that's existed for thousands of years and outright throw it out the window to replace it.
Using
acknowledging masculine and feminine characteristics.
Well,
yes,
we still do. We're not going to throw out masculine and feminine characteristics. Who said we were doing that? We're not just chucking out masculine and feminine characteristics.
Yes, we are, because you don't acknowledge you don't acknowledge the objectivity of this dichotomous split as the representation of gender. We assign gender a specific value, and you are outright denying its utility
that we use to identify.
So gender is the dichotomous split between two specific characteristics, masculine and feminine. And it functions spectrally. So if you're trying to tell me that these fucking vamp gender people fit into this dichotomous split somehow,
would be would be used to describe something you feel about those masculine and feminine characteristics. Yes,
and what does vampiricness have to do with gendered characteristics?
Do you want to talk to somebody who feels like vamp gender? I would love to have somebody on that has that. And we can have an entire ass interview with that person. But you're asking me a question about something I don't identify with, and I've never talked to somebody who identifies with vamp gender.
It's because it's something that's not real. You have no explanation.
Nobody exists with vamp gender. What do you mean it's not real?
You said that you were going to come in here and make my points but better.
They're better than yours.
No, they're not. They sound delusional.
You said the dichotomous representation of gender.
Yes. Do you know what? Do you know what feminine and masculine characteristics are and why we use them? Do you know what a dichotomy is? Yes, a dichotomy between two things. It represents the bimodal distribution of gender, which is what we're talking about here.
You can't have a dichotomy and a bimodal distribution.
Yeah, you absolutely can if the spectrum functions with a specific lean towards one end.
The option between two things.
Yes, you have the option between two things, and you lean one way or the other. I know it's
came in here with such fancy clothes, but you're so fucking retarded. How did you button that clothes?
The thing is, Sondsol, you think you're so smart, but you're the dumbest person on this panel because you couldn't push back against.
You can't even frame your face on the fucking camera. Why are you saying that I'm retarded?
The Destiny clone Adderall-ridden fucking kid.
You couldn't even push back.
You look like my thumbnail artist 10 years from now. Okay, I don't want to be saw my appearance. You came in here with like a whole ass overcoat, like you were gonna come to a formal like presidential meeting. Dude, you're not giving a presidential speech. You are on an online debate panel trying to act like a pretentious fuck in front of everybody, trying to like insult everybody. Dude, you literally come in here with
his mom
fucking
is yelling
crazy.
at him. His mom is yelling at him. Chill out, chill out.
Okay, listen, I'm sorry. Go address your mother. Go address your mother. All right, I'm done. I'm gonna take a step back.
This poor
okay, buddy.
Came into this conversation with a fucking overcoat like it was about to rain, but he has negative drip. Okay, this is like the most like he simultaneously says that there's a dichotomy between the genders, and then also that there's a spectrum. This guy is all kinds of fucking confused. I don't know what to fucking do for him.
I missed everything you just said, but Jesus Christ.
Well, you should listen. Yeah, no, that's actually good. Don't listen to us. No. Listen to your mother. Whatever your mother just said, do it.
I don't. I really don't.
I just told you not to listen to me. So
panel.
I put you in a like dichotomy here, okay? I put you in like whatever dichotomy means to you. You're in it right now, okay, buddy? So I told you not to listen to me, and by doing that and not listening to me, you are listening to me. So get fucked.
That didn't land with any of my audience.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It landed with me. It landed.
Sondsol, I don't know why you're like so trying to appeal the Bunk so hard. I don't know why, because
they're not appealing to me. They're just like
he is. He's absolutely.
I disagree. What are you?
Yeah, and you made terrible points this whole time. You've made terrible points this whole night.
Which one did you disagree with?
Which point did I disagree with? The fact that you wouldn't actually reject his claim about xenogenders and accepting them.
Andrew,
you sat here this whole time and you just bickered about like the tedious little most semantical thing.
Oh yeah, like
the only thing you fought about, the only thing you fought about, the only thing you argued about was your little utilitarian buff moment. You didn't actually posit a claim against xenogenders existing, and if you did, you did a terrible job. You did a monstrously awful job.
I mean, like, if you don't understand the words that I said, you know.
No, I understand the words you say, and they just are like.
If you could hear me talk about like the social construct and like the
yeah, you're talking about the social construct, but you don't understand the social construct because you're not framing it.
Yeah, I don't understand the simultaneously like the conception of gender that is simultaneously dichotomous and then also a spectrum. Yeah, I'm having trouble with it, buddy.
So the characteristics are dichotomous, and there is a spectrum. There's masculine characteristics and there's feminine characteristics.
Do you think that there are things
those are only those two things? There's no like categorization we can make for someone like being androgynous. That's not a thing.
Yeah,
we're going to disregard that.
Androgynous. So everything, there's no true neutral for gendered characteristics.
Well, there's no true neutral. Yeah, because it exists on a spectrum, and the way that people identify people kind of also exists on a spectrum. So there's like be uncertain in the assessment of somebody whether they're more masculine or more feminine. People could like not know. That's why the word androgynous exists. Okay, I have no idea what you're trying to get across in this like this discussion.
It makes sense, right? It makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to frame this simply, very simply.
Oh boy,
okay?
Please talk down to me like your mother just talked down to you for yelling too loud.
I would love to talk. I would love to talk down to the sweaty math addict on my screen. Okay.
Oh, the sweaty math addict.
Listen, I have a question.
Meth addict. You meant meth addict because you said it like math, and that makes it sound like I'm really smart.
No, you're math addict.
I'm a math addict. No, I'm a math addict. I'm going to do calculations about how long it's going to take your mother to walk back in on you.
Yeah, I was about to ask, what is the like on gendered traits and the dichotomy of these gendered traits? Is it more masculine or feminine for your mom to bust in on you and yell at you in the middle of a conversation?
Man, you really got me there, Sondsol.
That was funny. Go fuck yourself. Not only are you stupid, but you don't even have a sense of humor. You have no redeeming qualities. Go fuck
objectively
you.
Smarter than you. I'm going to talk to you.
Your mom just walked in on you on an online debate. You're acting like you're at the presidential election right now, and you don't even have a good sense of humor. So go like,
but
please.
I'm still
you
smarter than you, so it's like
no, you're
insane.
not. You are just not smarter than me. Okay, dude. I don't know.
Can you be smarter?
I'm smart enough to not walk into.
That's a crazy.
I'm not talking that quickly. Okay, maybe. Do I need to talk to you like this?
Okay.
Do I need to talk
like
to you?
Eminem, but you look like Stan?
Talk to you.
You talk like Eminem, but you look like Stan.
Dude, that like, how old are you? Like, that was like that, dude. You just call me Stan from like the music video Stan. I feel so insulted.
If you got
I'm crying right now.
You look like Stan.
Okay,
you look like Stan.
I am crying right now. You fucked me up there. That sucked.
You're crying out of your pores because of how much meth you've consumed today.
Dylan, can you move
I've
your
consumed
camera so
all
that
the
we can
meth.
see your face when you're talking to her?
Sure.
I want to see inside of your dirty closet too.
Yeah. Well, I've been packing up.
Yeah. Why don't you pan the fucking camera around your room, Sondsol?
I don't actually think that I can, but I mean, like, you're seeing like the majority of it right here. So
yeah, and you're not living in a pigsty, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no.
Your room looks much cleaner than me.
Fuck up, you lying sack of dirty, filthy hippie shit. You got a filthy ass room, and we all know it, Sondsol.
There's nothing else. Like all the furniture that you see right here is all the furniture in this room.
We had beforehand between me and Sondsol like so much more civil than whatever the fuck we just went into. Dylan,
yeah,
because this guy doesn't like being talked down. He doesn't be like talked down to. Okay.
Yeah, well, because
then maybe you shouldn't live with your mother, so she can't barge in and talk down to you.
No, talking down is good when I objectively talk down to people who are lesser than me. That's why I do it.
So you're never going to do it because you are quite literally the worst person I've ever met. You are single-handedly the worst person I've ever met. I've never met a single person that I would want dead more.
Well, you've never met real people.
In Minecraft,
you live on the internet.
I've met a lot of real people, okay? I met a lot of real people. I met more people than the people on your buttons. I actually do not live with my mother, no.
Your father, then?
No.
You live on your own?
I'm not going down the entire like relative list of who I could possibly be inhabiting his house. That sounds so fucking gay.
Well, I mean, I'm just asking if you're living with your parents.
No, my parents are not going to burst in on me mid-debate.
I mean, that's not what I asked you.
Well, no, you just did. You literally just did ask me that. You literally just asked me. I was asking if you live with your parents. I said no. And you're like, that's not what I'm asking you.
But I think you're lying, though.
Totally, dude. You got me.
Yeah.
Okay. Just
like how old are you? What,
I
like
was
18?
lying about
19?
not being Destiny. I'm actually a 6,000-year-old dragon, dude.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I would. If the diss on Dylan is your parents.
Well, no, but my mother has not walked in on me. Okay, because I'm not. She can't.
We don't have to.
But she can't.
I'm reasonably certain that
your mother can't walk in on you because you've never had a lover.
To the driveway.
You have to understand, Andrew. The only dunk.
How does that make any sense?
It's not like the.
I never had a lover, so my mother can never walk in on me. What does that mean?
It's not like the only dunk we have is that his mom can bust in on him, right? We also have this like ratty ass room and this like extreme overdressing for the occasion. Like there's a lot that we can make fun of. I did fix one of the things though.
I can assure you, I did not get dressed up for this. I can assure you, I did not get dressed up.
Buddy, I do not believe you. I do not believe you on that one. You can keep telling me it.
That's my promise.
Hang on a second. Jim Bob asked for $5. Bunk, if I identify as a 3-year-old, should I be permitted to attend daycare? Go ahead, Bunk.
Is that a legitimate question? So first of all, I'm going to assess that you are a pedophile, most likely, and secondly, your claim to your gender is not a claim to a physical reality that you are a 3-year-old. So probably not.
So why can't we claim this physical reality for the rest of these made-up bullshit terms?
You're not claiming the physical reality.
Well, it seems like the 3-year-old Xenogender can.
Dylan.
I didn't have to concede it. I never made the point.
No, yeah, exactly.
I didn't have to walk anything back. I never made that point.
No. Like you don't have to like walk something back to concede it, right? You can have a concession.
Well, no, you do by definition.
Well, maybe I'm using the wrong word here.
It means to admit that something previously asserted is true.
It's not part of your argument that you are literally like a deer gender, but it is a metaphor for something that you feel internally. If you're not going to argue against the points that he's making, then don't fucking bring up an argument there.
Well, no,
Sondsol, you know a lot about conceding, don't you?
No, Dylan, what you did was you bursted in.
I remember the last time.
Bursted in here.
All right.
Yeah. He remembers a whole bunch of stuff.
You were the caller in. I appreciate you calling in.
That guy sucks. I hate that guy.
Wait, can we bring him back in? I was having fun bullying him again.
Well, then bring him on your stream. It's 2 hours in, and I'm fucking tired. I appreciate you guys coming on to the Crucible tonight to argue this Xenogender thing. literally the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life, but that's fine, right? And I'm sure that'll land with my audience. So
hey,
did it?
I just want both of you.
Land
I
with
want
your
both of
audience?
you
Did
to
you find that
understand.
funny before you said it? Did you like chuckle inside? Like have a little?
Oh, you're
like...
muted, Andrew.
do you do that all the time? Is that
do what?
Oh
what?
no, you're off kilter on my end. Oh, you
yeah,
just
I
really
don't
fast.
know. Yeah, there was some kind of freezing, but I'm just curious. Like, is it an endearing quality? Do you think to spurg out at everything that you're asked always?
Yes.
You think that that's an endearing quality?
That's exactly what I've been doing.
Well, I mean, it is what you've been doing.
You own me, okay?
I'm not gonna.
I feel defeated.
Andrew, I'm not gonna lie. I do think it's endearing. I want to do a duo debate with Bunk sometime on the Crucible, and I want you to understand the only I was not supposed to ever argue Xenogenders again, at least for 6 months. I made a promise to my chat, but I broke that promise for you, Andrew. All right. I've had like 12 conversations about Xenogender in the past 4 weeks, and I'm tired of it. But I came here for you, and I came here for Bunk, and this was very fun.
I appreciate it, Sondsol. You're awesome. I love you, buddy.
I love you too, buddy.
All right. Well, you guys can go have homoerotic sex
Whoa,
now. I'm
we're
ending
talking
the
about
stream.
homoerotic sex.
Have a fantastic night. Thank you both for coming on, Bunk. I'll never see you again. You're the single most annoying motherfucker I've ever seen in my life. Take care, everybody. Buddy. Have a good one.
Oh boy, it was fun. That was fun. Oh boy. We're outie, dude. Yeah, holy fuck. Oh boy, I'm gonna hit up synth actually. Oh boy. That was fun. That was a fun chat.
That was super fucking fun. Hey,
Oh, boy.
Andrew, please bring on every single time I debate on your show. I demand. All right, this is now my demand. All right, this is instead of like paying me to come onto your show, right? All I want is for you to bring on Dylan at the very end to get dunked on mercilessly. Okay, that's all
I'm not gonna lie. He had something going for him until his mom busted in his room. That was oh boy. He
was so like upsetty spaghetti from the get-go. The fact that you called him buddy and then he stopped and like his lips went, you know, like the lips pressing together. Don't call me buddy.
I didn't like that one very much.
Oh shit, dude.
Oh boy.
Oh fuck.
I don't know, man. I call everybody buddy,
Bunk.
so it's really weird to me when someone's like, stop condescending me. I'm just
Hey,
talking
Bunk, I think Dylan Blay is trying to come onto my stream right now. I don't know if I have time to stream. Do you want to bully him for like 10 minutes?
I'll take him on my stream, dude. Hold up.
You know what?
I'm gonna hop in my live chat right now. This is
okay, gotcha. Catch you later. All right.
All right. Peace, my dude. Peace.
Peace, bud.